Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing today? Thank you, William. Yes, I got your question. And Crystal, you were having lunch, and I'm having coffee, and it's all outstanding. Now, um, before we get started today, I wanted to talk about all the stuff that we should have learned whenever we turn on. Now I hear myself. Before we get started today, I wanted to talk about. Holy crap! I have a delay out of my YouTube. Hang on. Stuff I'm hearing myself. I'm hearing myself. There you go. Now I shut myself up, as it should be. Things my ex-wife was never able to do to shut me up. And here, all it took was a click of a button. I wanted to talk about, obviously, we talk about military history because, well, that's kind of what we do here. But a lot of people who, thank you, you caught it. Yes, someone was complaining bitterly about the stains of the wall when I do these from work. So I figured I'd change my backdrop to a more fitting setting. Not that anybody would be in the right mind to actually put me in the White House themselves. But since we're all we are generally what I have found, people who have an interest in military history are very common sense, down to earth, nuts and bolts kind of people. We kind of get the whole common sense. We don't have to define what common sense is. But I'm going to do it anyway, just because it's kind of fun. And one of the things I kept really wanting to bring up when we talk about lessons learned from military history and from previous wars, as we paddle through warfare, we will see how lessons have been learned and how sometimes they have utterly been forgotten. And we see it. One of the first shots of the Franco Prussian War was Napoleon had his son fire the cannon over, I think it was Strasbourg, over the city. And we fast forward till today, and we see the Russians shelling some of the civilian cities in the Ukraine. And quite frankly, it's always been done that you bomb or you shell civilian population to diminish their morale. And it has never throughout history worked. Just to take one basic lesson, it always solidifies defense against the possible attacker and invader. So, so that's just one of the simple, easy things that everybody, especially anybody in uniform, should learn. It's the whole hearts and minds. Was it Nixon that said, if I have to buy the balls, the hearts and minds would follow? It doesn't always work that way. But before we get into that, I keep thinking about, does the education system of today in the West, does it really prepare you or our children for the future? And I wanted to run through a couple of courses of some of the things that you can study if you're going to high school or college today. But before I do that, I think we're going to start with a little levity before we realize that the world is all terrible and tragic and coming to an end, and we're all going to die by the end of this podcast. I got an email from the CIA, and I wanted to share it with you. Obviously, it states, "Dear Tino, we have missed you here at the agency. Please come by, and we will always have donuts and coffee ready for you. Oh, sorry, we have just heard from our wiretapping. You no longer drink coffee." Of course, that's not what they wrote. What they wrote in my request to one of the Kamla Berkestal and so on questions, what I asked for specifically was detailed records detailing the special programs of General Hans Kamla working with World War II, Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Austria, and there were any records obtained to his existence in the US or other allied countries after the war. And hi, CIA. Now that we're talking about, you're listening. This was the response I got. And I quote, "We conducted a thorough search of the CIA-originated records that would reveal a publicly acknowledged CIA affiliation with the subject of your request and located one previous release document of which is enclosed," which is the 20 pages of the tunnel systems that I've showed you a million times, that is online in better quality than the one they sent me, that we have all seen It is old news, nothing there. However, they then write, in accordance to Section 3.6a of Executive Order 13-526, to the extent that your request also seeks records, if any exist, that would reveal the unacknowledged or classified affiliations with the subject of your request, the CIA can neither confirm or deny the existence or non-existence of records responsive to your request. The fact of the existence or non-existence of such records is in itself currently and properly classified and is intelligence source and methods information protected from disclosure by Section 6 of the CIA Act 1949. As unamended in section blah, 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 blah. Therefore, the portion of your request is denied pursuant to FOIA exemption, blah, blah, blah. If you seek to dispute resolution services from the FBI, blah, blah, blah. So, they did not send flowers with that. This is exactly what I expected they were going to do. It's also interesting that this law was passed in 1949 after the war was over, at a time where you would think, well, yes, you have the Cold War beginning, but this is at a time where the OSS were creating large bonfires with all their old documents. Still, we know the documents exist. We know the files exist. We know the records. Same answer I got over the Beckerstal tunnels and so on. We all know that these records were taken because some of the photos have been leaked. So that just means we are on to the next step of the ladder of, I guess we have to go get a lawyer and go to court. We think, as I wrote the nice gentleman from the CIA back, that I would give him a call. He actually gave me a phone number. So I'll give him a call and talk about this. Because if you want to tell me that you are keeping this classified to protect intelligence gathering methods anno 1945 to 49, 50, I dare say, and I do hope that the agency has improved their method gathering capabilities since the Second World War, since the OSS, where they would, you capture an enemy soldier and beat the truth out of him. I'm not, an oldie but a goodie. I'm not saying that's the wrong way to go. It seems to be working better than just sitting back and staring at computers waiting for something to flag, which is what it seems most of intelligence is doing the same thing algorithm-wise with the various catchphrases and words on all the social media that they're all tapped into anyway. It seems that people physical intelligence was a better way to gather intelligence. It just, you have to infiltrate. Of course, it makes it hard when you infiltrate people that are vastly different than you, or if you were to infiltrate in the Middle East, you have to know the lingo, the language. If you have to infiltrate China, it would probably be helpful if you, I don't know, doesn't look like a 6'3" blonde American. So we are on to looking. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you because we know that they have these documents, and we know what they took pictures of, what they covered, and we also know it cannot possibly be a secret anymore. But the default, let's say no, is easy. So that's what most would go to. And now we're just going to have to go take it to the next level. But that's all right. I always expected that to happen. I have 30 different FOIA requests out there for different things, and I have I'm still hoping to hear. I had a conversation with the Russian archives before the war started, which obviously is on hold right now. Or, as I said, I'm not at war with the Russian archives, and presumably they're not at war with me. However, very interesting, as Joseph pointed out a couple of days ago, the Russians are still releasing documents from the Second World War, some of which may be sensitive, embarrassing, whatever the word you want to pick, for some of the Western governments. Like they released recently all the documentation they had on Hitler's pilot. So they are releasing the things I have been asking for. I don't know if they're doing it for the same reason. I don't really care why they're doing it as long as they're doing it, which was also my plea and explanation to the dear Austrians that I still have not heard back from, despite I'll be out there in a few weeks. That this is coming. It's going to happen. And it would probably be better off for all those who have kept the secrets for all this time that they get ahead of that curve by explaining why and what. I'm just saying. I think for the sake of history, we actually should. We probably should start releasing some of the things that we've been hiding. One thing that I never understood was, I think a few months ago, the British Archive announced that they finally released the last of the classified documentation pertaining to the Holocaust. Why? What classified information could there possibly be 77 years later pertaining to that? But that's the world we live in. We are not entitled to know until somebody in a ill-fitting suit decides that we need to. Anyway, speaking of ill-fitting suits, and we're going to get to all the questions, but I just want to put this in context of the interesting world we're trying to learn from. Because if we are going to learn from military blunders or successes from all the various wars back in the day, we have to sort of agree that, well, the people that we need to teach are the ones in the military with say, or in the Pentagon, or in the NATO headquarters, the ones who are advising politicians. And it would behoove the politicians somewhat to actually learn something about military history and how it all works, instead of hiding away in a suit, saying it's not going to happen, that's not the world we live in, we are much more civilized. And I'm not entirely sure the viral warfares we're waging against each other now with that capability is actually more or less civilized than just tossing bombs at each other. I'm not entirely sure. I made up my mind on that one. You can afford to buy John Wick's locker. First and last time you're going to hear me say that for a while. But no, I'm not buying any more guns for a while. I need to go to Europe first. And I'm not needing anything. Anyway, yeah, all the money right now is need to go to the trip. Next week I have drill, so I'll be sleeping in a tent with surrounded by horses, scorpions, and elk. And our commanding officer will not let us shoot and eat the elk. Probably a good thing. I seem to remember elk being a bit chewy. Anyway, next week I'm on drill. Then I have a week of packing and working, and then I'll be out in Europe around the 20th, filming my way through some of the places you really want to see. And I'm, for a change, not going to actually tell everybody everything I'm going to be doing until I have done it. I'm hopefully going to sit down with the Austrians. Certainly, I had invited them to tea and coffee. If coffee is the deal breaker, I'll drink coffee that day. Lots of forts bunkers. If any of you are aware or near the Sirenco V1 bunker out in France, I have conflicting informations. Thank you, William. There goes the coffee. I have conflicting information if I can get in or not. It says on one hand it's on private property and it's locked off because there were accidents. If any of you have any information on that V1 bunker, because I would like to see it, because it fits in. I'm doing a thing on all the vengeance weapons V1. That's not really what they were called in Germany. The big bunker, the La Coupole, the V3 gun, and the V1 bunker that was never actually put in operation out in France, across from the canal. I've been to 3 of them, but that one I haven't been to. And before I drive all the way to Calais, which is completely opposite direction I would be going, I want to make damn sure I can actually get into it, even if I have to sneak in there. No, it's on private property, so that's where I draw the line. Thank you, William. Again. Thank you. Hold you. Ian, thank you. Why are you all making me drink coffee? Um, Seriously, my stomach feels better than that. I haven't had coffee for a month. Um, 6, 7 Red Bulls will cure that thing right up there. A couple of rock stars, you just on top. Anyway, Sianco, that I will spell for you in 30 seconds. I'll put it up. Let's see. Come on then. Come on. There we go. It is. I will put it in a line there. Somebody must know somebody who lives out close to this thing. Damn, my computer. That one. That's sort of the last one that's hanging behind. I'll get. Beer. You know what? I haven't had a beer for a while. That might not be a bad idea. I'll tell you what. I'm gonna order a box of cigars because that seems like something we should be doing. So anyway, that's one of the things, and a bunch of forts and a bunch of things, and we can talk about that after this episode where we're going to go. There's a couple of forts I want to pick up on. I have gotten a positive back from Hackenberg, Overage, Hackenberg, where I have been before. I did an episode from there, but now they will let me into the NATO headquarters and that tunnel where the Germans constructed bits and pieces during the war. So I can't possibly say no to that. So that is part of the plan. Of course, I am going to that place in Germany. I'm going to be spending some time in Thüringen. I'm telling you, and I will be meeting with some of the local historians, some of the guys that are also doing episodes from this. Some of the local Germans have been sent me bits and pieces on what they've been doing, and some of them have been borrowing my footage. I gladly, anybody need footage to talk about any of the same things that I'm talking about. If I had a possibility of going or filming or droning something that you didn't, and you want to borrow my footage, by all means, just shoot me an email, and I'll be more than happy to share. I was never really one to think that hiding documents was a good idea, like we found, and I see in Austria, it's a big deal with a lot of historians that are sitting on individual documents and paperwork and research that they don't want to share about the very things that we want to do, which is a problem, because I always say we need to have a forum. We need to have a conference. We can do conferences on UFOs and aliens and Roswell, and we can do forums on the evolution of the phenomenon of Lady Gaga, but we can't have a forum on World War II special research programs. And I find that really strange. And Crystal Flocken told me that she wanted to do it, but nobody wants to show up and show and tell. Nobody wants to share their information. Fortunately, and I will send a really big thank you to those of you who have been on the ground, who've grown up there, who has documents and papers and satellite footage, videos, aerial photographs. So people have been looking at these things for many, many decades. And me having started doing the series that I did, I'm really, really happy that you have shared. I get a lot of information, coordinates, documents, photocopy scans from people who have been looking into this for a long time, and then they ran into the same wall that everybody runs into when there's not a forum to share. So that's what I've been trying to create, is a forum to share. And so that's really, really good. Now I have places to look and go, and I have a better idea of what may have taken place. One thing I will say is, when you send me information about XYZ happened at this place at this time, do try to let me know where you have gotten the information, so I have an idea what the provenance is. Because looking up on websites, there's a lot of websites that has a lot of I'm not going to say information, but it doesn't have any provenance. We don't know where it came from. So it's hard to determine if anybody just made it up or they actually know. So try to always figure out where the information came from. That and I know it's hard with the documents because, well, again, we're looking at things that are still classified. So, but friends are friends, and friends are friends are friends, and hopefully we can all get it together. And when everything has sort of come out, that they did have a forum some 10 years ago, or had a town hall meeting out in Ordorf in Jonastal, where there was a conversation about this, and so it does happen. And but now with the internet, we have on one hand the possibility of meeting and reaching more people, but we also have the possibility of being shut down or trolled or what have you a lot quicker, which is very interesting. Especially because, like I said, we are living in a world where I saw, and I don't remember who it was, fortunately, because I don't pay that much attention. But sometimes I will stumble over something that is so absolutely, utterly insane that shows exactly what we're talking about. How the lack of understanding of history is running us over the edge, maybe onto another plateau. We don't know. But when I see a meme that says, by implementing the quote, by implementing free speech, that's how the Nazis began. I don't have to tell you what this woman believed in or where she was from. But if you genuinely think that the way the National Socialists took power in Nazi Germany, or even the communists took power in communist Russia, if you think that began with them allowing for free speech, you are probably misguided to a degree that I am not sure any of my degrees can actually fix and help you. But if people believe that, that really is an indication of how far gone our education system uh, really, thank you, machine, yes, really has gone. That is terrifying. It is terrifying to think that the implementation of fascism starts with free speech. Fascism, communism, isms, any isms, that's where free speech goes to die. And it's interesting, Gerhard sent me I don't know if I shared this with you before. I'm getting old, I forget things. I'll repeat myself. Gerhard sent me a very interesting link a couple of days ago because he saw the episode I did from Vienna, which he should because he's in it, where I talk about the cafe that Hitler and Stalin and Trotsky and how they all frequented Tito and how they all frequented the same area of cafes in Vienna before World War I. And I speculated, really interesting, that they quite possibly have met. I mean, Hitler and Trotsky went to the same cafe in Vienna. They must have met. They were both politically interested. Well, not as much before World War I, but certainly after. They must have met and exchanged some sort of views. Now, if you look up, and this is one thing we really need to understand when we search for information online, and what we find is dependent on, well, who wrote it, who will let you read it. Sometimes you'll just run into a dead link or an unsecure link not because it is, but because whoever is your internet provider does not believe that this needs to be shared. And these are usually things that are completely harmless. There's no political anything, but you need to understand the difference between the countries you're in and the information you get. He sent me the German internet link, the Wikipedia link, and we know Wikipedia, they are thorough in their research. Okay, I'll give it to them. They actually do break things down roughly okay. But he sent me the internet link to this cafe, and it was mentioned, yes, before the wars, these people went there. Hitler was not mentioned. And Lord knows Hitler's life in Vienna is quite well documented. This I should join you on the whole. Yes. going into the whole disinformation thing, but it's a real thing. On the German-speaking Wikipedia, Hitler was not mentioned at all in relation to that cafe in Vienna. When you go on to the same cafe Wikipedia link in English, he is. It's a small difference. But our colleagues in Germany and Austria are not hearing everything we are hearing. They're not reading what we're reading. Sometimes they don't have access to the same websites. They just don't find them. Sometimes the episodes they just can't see. And the same thing, we can see things. Yes, we can see things here they can't see there. But sometimes they can see things there that we can't see here. It's very much a scary way of subtly and quietly silencing. It's shadow banning. We've all heard that term before, but it's a real thing. But what's weird about it is we're not talking about politics or diseases or anything that is a hot button topic right now. We're talking about old World War II research, pre-World War One, some of it. And it's very interesting that ever since World War II, the world has created a direction of conversation that is only one-sided. And theoretically, I think most people who fought and died during World War II did so hoping to save the world from isms, fascism, communism, Nazism, globalism, if there was such a thing, and certainly to preserve the rights of individuals and freedoms. That, I think, is what most people then fought for. If you had actually broken down to it, I think they would be horribly sad to see the world today. And that's how people have changed. They came back from the wars, and a lot of the soldiers, a lot of the school teachers and superintendents, and so they were former soldiers who've been around the world. They saw things. They had a life experience. And that kind of brings me into a couple of the things that I thought was absolutely hilarious. I wanted to say, well, the question is, for us to be able to learn and understand from history or military history, we have to accept an education system that teaches these things. Okay. And this is where I don't know if Lady Gaga's here. She's I know a lot of ladies should. Well, I don't know. I haven't seen her for a while, but she I know is in university out there. So there's one. If anybody here is if anybody is listening to this live who is in school, high school, college, I would love to have you join on. I actually had a friend of mine. She went to UCLA, and the insane things they taught her. She was a very smart girl, and she was actually Chinese, but she was a very smart girl, and she would tell me horror stories about the things they made them learn. And speaking of that, hold your comments for a minute because I need to rant on while I can still remember. One thing I thought was actually funny. You can look up some of this for us to understand, to explain history and basic common sense science of the world. There's a couple of things we probably should remember, and I kind of want to talk about it because it brings into it. It's like lessons from the wars, yes, but what about lessons from the Great Recession in the late 20s? There's a lot of lessons from that we may want to learn, because here was a bunch of people who just had everything taken from them, and a lot of them didn't have much to begin with, which actually is a good thing, because if you don't have much and there's a huge recession and the world goes bankrupt and light goes out and you don't have much, well, you're not going to lose much. And you are used to being able to survive and live on less. And I think the lesson of living on less with less, it makes you more creative. You don't have to necessarily start robbing banks and people right off. It makes you more creative, more adaptive, and more innovative than if you are grown up. If you grow up and your main source of lesson and learning is digital, if everything you do and see and learn is on a computer, you are not going to be able to survive the real world if the chip goes up. So I looked up something interesting. Speaking of this, the college courses that has been deemed the most useless degrees of 2022 by investment bankers. Like anybody was going to give you a loan, a college loan to go through courses. If you were to talk to the bankers, the investors, saying, well, these courses are useless, you shouldn't borrow money to take these. I want you to think about this. These are the ones that they said were useless. Advertising, which I think is something that you would, common sense person would think advertising. That's something there's always going to be a need for, even if it has to adapt to more internet. Okay. Anthropology and archaeology. That is terrifying. How is that useless? Yes, maybe you're not going to be a millionaire from any of it, but it is a really important study. Archaeology, how could that ever make that list? Fashion design. Okay, I don't know. College course in fashion design. I mean, people are always going to wear clothes. It's always going to go in circles. So I guess if you study fashion design of 10 years ago, you just do that and then just repeat for the next 10 years, trailing. But anyway, here's a sad one. Tourism and hospitality, which boils down to service, I guess. Isn't that sad? You don't want to tourism and hospitality? That was one of them. My mother was a tourist guide, and she ran a hotel all her life. That was her entire life, and she was great at it. And that's what makes traveling worth something if you have a tourist guide. And most people, they live for their few vacations a year, where they go somewhere. And the one thing they really would like to have is hospitality and tourism. I don't want to ever go somewhere and be checked in by a computer. I don't want to get a tourist guide, put it in my phone, and then I'll just listen to it a little as I walk through an area. I want somebody who knows what they're talking about. That was a keynote there. To walk me through wherever I am, someone I can ask questions for. Just like why computer learning in schools is useless. You need a back and forth physical relationship and a conversation. But apparently that's also going to go away. And I'm telling you about where things are going. Communications, which is granted, it's a lot of different things, but I mean, journalism, reporting, you can theoretically say that, yes, public relations, well, journalism is sort of dead. Reporting, if you just need to report what you see without all the other stuff, when is there not going to be a need for this? Is that not something that should not be on that list? Here's the saddest thing of all. The one that's on the list of the most useless degrees is education. No one wants to lend you money if you want to take a degree in education. And we're starting to see what the problem of the future is. And it gets better. A degree in criminal justice. Who needs it? Let everybody go. I don't even know what to say to that. It's criminal justice? Yeah, who needs that? Creative writing degrees. So we don't need to write creatively. Although I thought that creative writing is what most, journalists and politicians were doing. Except they're not really very creative anymore. So I guess maybe that's why it's a dying art. Theater arts. I think that's just sad. I mean, I know that might be sentimental. I don't go to the theater very often. Probably because they don't really put anything on that I want to see. And I live in LA, so theater is, no. You would think that would be, I can understand why that might not be a degree, but by something of a self-study, but it certainly should be an option. And the most interesting thing is computer science. Computer science degrees are now not really interesting, which I don't know if because they got a different name, but I think that's kind of weird. That's kind of a strange thing. I thought we were supposed to live a future life based on sitting in the sofa eating chips with our electronic device, which is a computer, watching another electronic device, while another electronic device is cooking our dinner and massaging our feet. I thought that was what the future was going to be like, but I guess I'm wrong on that. I thought it's an interesting way. If you look at how valuable degrees are, it's a really interesting direction the world is going to go, and I don't really like it. I don't really like it. But if we take history and archaeology and teaching and communication out, well, then what does it matter if we try to pull lessons out of the past wars, because by the time the next war will be planned and fought, it'll be done by people who can't communicate, who can't teach these skills, who won't know them because they haven't, the history and archaeology is gone. So they don't know the past. They can't teach the future. Doesn't really look good, does it? We're taking the fundamentals of society, of what we need in order to basically survive. And my definition of basically survival is, if someone pulls the plug on all electricity and your car won't drive, can you still survive? Can you live? Are you going to sit at home and wait until you run out of cans? Or can you actually do something with your life to sustain it? Do you have a plan? I'm not saying that electricity is going to go out, but if we don't do something creative, I mean, if it's up to those very green people, then eventually all electricity will be turned off because, well, that's they will not, if they don't accept nuclear. That's just kind of how things are going to go. If everything is going to be electronic, and you want to take away fossil fuels, all of them, and then there's going to be some, especially some very dark and cold places where sun and wind won't really work in the winter. That's going to be very, very cold. As they're going to find out in Europe, if Cruella de Vanderhagen, whatever her name is, will have her way and say no more fuel from Russia in the next 6 months. Considering how many houses are heated by fuel in, say, Germany, for one, it will be a very, very cold turn of winter. And speaking of that, so we go back to lessons learned from the Great Depression. I mean, what do you need? What happened in the Great Depression? You had people, the ones who had riches, that committed suicides in droves because all of a sudden they had nothing and they didn't know how to cope. And that's one of what we really need to instill in the young generation, is to be tough enough to survive adversity. When I was 18, I lived in my car in Gold's Gyms parking lot while I was working a day job and getting ready for a competition. And it was the best time of my life. I had a big suitcase in the trunk, and I showered and shaved at the gym. I could have gone home. I mean, I could have packed up and gone home, but I loved it because I didn't have much, so there wasn't much to lose. Although my car did get stolen and was gone for 3.5 weeks, which was, well, annoying. But if you don't have much, there's not much for anyone to take. But if you're able to sustain life on little, and that's what happened during the Depression. So if we take away the technology, if all learning becomes technology based, well, then you're really going to have a problem if technology fails, and it will fail if there's a significant event. In America has been to a large extent saved or protected from significant events, at least since the Civil War. I will say 9/11 was a significant event, but it didn't stop the supply chain. It didn't stop food from being manufactured. It actually slowed down crime in New York by quite a while because it hammered people together instead of apart, which is we then continue to do after that. But if you're only capable of sustaining life based on technology, you're going to have a very hard time if that technology goes away. If the electricity goes, which I live in the pinnacle of civilization, that is Southern California, where power goes out every now and again, where I don't have cell reception in half the town because, well, we just don't have the infrastructure. We talk about bad infrastructure. We've seen billions of infrastructure in Afghanistan, and I have to replace my seals in my bike every couple of months because I keep banging into potholes they can't even fix. We have a horrible infrastructure, and it wouldn't take much to destroy that, to destroy the supply flow of electricity, with which also comes internet communications, which will then lead to lesser fuel. So it won't, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying you need to be able to handle that life. just like going back to the Depression. What can you do? What do you have? Do you have all your money put in expense in investments? They go up and down. I don't understand enough about investing, so buy gold coins, buy gold, have something that you can use to trade and barter if you need to, because that is what it'll really boil down to, especially if they want to do the cashless thing and then the system goes down. Then what do you physically have you can trade with your neighbor for something? Do you know how to grow crops? Do you know how to grow food, plants? Do you have any seeds in the house? Do you know anything about gardening? Um, it's the little things. Do you know how to sew? If manufacturing goes down, if everything goes down, if there's a global crisis, you're not going to get new clothes at the store every time. So you need actually, maybe you do know how to learn to sew. Do you have a plan for getting out of a bad area? Do you know how to create and prepare food? There's lessons from that crisis. When you go to them, the recession wasn't just a couple of months or a year back then. Um, the depression was a decade where people they couldn't get anything and they had to work for it. They had to create and innovate, and the sense of that is the sense of community, is having a sense of community with your neighbors, with your friends, where you can all sustain each other, because the whole theory of the world's going to come to an end, the aliens have landed, the crazy people of Washington have spread, and you put on your backpack and you walk into the wilderness and you come back out in a couple of years when everyone's dead or done. It doesn't work that way. You have to have a community. You have to have people around you. You have to have backup. It's not much different than planning military operation. You have to figure out where you want to go and how you're going to get there, and alternative ways of getting there, communication with the people you're traveling with, security, safety, food, provisions, how long are you going to stay there, what happens when you outrun your supplies, what's your plan for obtaining more. It's all about planning. Same thing with the military. And it's interesting because we're now looking at how Franco Prussian War, the French absolutely would not surrender for the mere principle of not wanting to surrender national pride. Towards the end of the Franco Prussian War, Paris was surrounded. And it's very interesting because if you take the Franco Prussian War and you drag the parallels to what Russia was doing in the Ukraine up until recently, I'm assuming there's a shift of tactics now because the first thing didn't really work. The Franco-Prussian War was, in many ways, it was not. Well, I will say it was the first of the modern wars. And honestly, there are some colleges, historians, that don't really touch it. I have even heard historians say, Franco-Prussian War, we don't write about it because it's not a real war. Well, it was a real war that spanned over 1870 to 71. It involved most of Europe, Italy, Spain, all of what is now Germany, Poland. It was a big deal, and towns were laid to waste. People died. Borders shifted. Wars were fought with real modern implements, modern weapons. Everything had been, the weapons were resembling that of Napoleon the First, but they had been upgraded. You had something that will almost be akin to automatic fire. You had breech loading cannons. You had faster firing rifles. You had the mitrailleuse. You had modern ways of war. You had people with guns hauled up in forts. And that's where a lot of lessons should have been learned. You also had a lot of sieges where the French actually started. They poked the Prussians and the Germans a little bit. Why it started it could have been said it may have been a little bit of a trick from the German Kaiser with a little bit of snob towards the French that they jumped on. It could also be said that it was Napoleon III's wife that sort of egged him on to do something. For whatever reason, everyone rallied to the flag on both sides. Little, you can say it was a little head loose because the French rallied to the flag, signed up, celebrated and cheered when the first cannonball went over towards the Germans, and or the Germans, Prussians, um, who had been preparing for this for a while, and they had the new Krupp guns, and they had who had the better rifle. The French probably had the better rifle during the Franco Prussian War, but the Germans and the Prussians most certainly had the better artillery. And both sides had incredibly fierce and stubborn cavalry that really had no place in that war, because riding horse cavalry towards gunfire, it doesn't go well, and it didn't go well. If you do it in numbers, eventually you'll overrun the cannons, but you leave behind a lot of dead horses and men. Lesson number one. All right, I'll try to read this at the same time as well. But you're looking at a lot of, it's a little bit like, I'm not saying the Russians went into the Ukraine all headlong without having enough of anything. We don't know enough about how well the Russians planned this and what they were planning for. But it seems to me, when I look at the map, they all sort of went in from different directions, a little bit like the Prussians did against France, because the French fired the first couple of cannonballs over the German-Prussian border, and then in return, a whole bunch of very angry, very well-armed cannoneers and Prussian gunners and artillery started raining shells back on them and pushed them all the way back and back and back and back into France. So there was a big siege at Metz in Alsace-Lorraine, where you know how much I love Metz, and they just continued all the way to Paris was surrounded. Now we had surrounded cities were running out of foodstuffs, and they were firmly surrounded. The French army did not have what they. I'm paraphrasing, making this a little shorter. You look at the Russians rushed in different spearheads and surrounded individual cities that they then couldn't hold or pulled out of. But it seems the French were not really prepared for sieges. They were literally eating dogs and cats and rats, and in Paris they were eating all the zoo animals from Paris, and the French would not surrender. They absolutely would not surrender, because the Prussians and Germans, they wanted Alsace-Lorraine. They wanted something in return for a war they, well, technically didn't start. So the French wouldn't give, and the people were starving, and the soldiers were dying, and there was absolutely no way of winning. And so the Germans, it was interesting because the Kaiser wanted Moltke to start shelling Paris, and he absolutely didn't want to, because, well, Paris was under siege. It was a huge city. He didn't feel he had enough guns to lay waste to the city anyway. So all he would do would be cause strengthen morale. Because you start shelling cities, everybody gets pissed off, and the soldiers fight harder, and you strengthen the resolve of the people you're shelling. It hasn't very often worked that you shelled a city into submission, because even if you take the city, you practically have to destroy the whole thing first, which brings us to another misnomer of war, that you're not going to. Well, it was said of this one. Well, you don't want to destroy a city because you can't use it. Well, in what war has that ever been the case? When have you ever anybody ever tried to win a war by not really destroying the city? Leningrad, Stalingrad, Mariupol, Metz, and any of these cities, if they're surrounded, Leningrad, I don't remember any historical proceedings for selectively bombing a city so you can use it later. Because again, we're not looking until recent decades where you have the tactical ability of destroying just the military capability in a city of the enemy. And still that didn't work very well. Remember how Saddam would put up anti-aircraft missiles and batteries on top of hospitals. Then you would bomb the hospitals. Now we look back. Now it becomes a PR war. So to take a city, you have, if you're going to do it, then you have to do it. And you see now, we'd also said that, well, the Russians they didn't really want to destroy these cities because that they can't use them. I don't think that exactly holds up to reality. I think the Russians then were just as resolved as the Russians now, as the Kaiser was then, to destroy Paris in order to end the damn war. And I don't think we've seen the last of the Russians. What it looks at, if I look at as I just did, as an overview of what happened in Ukraine, the Russians went in from a different bunch of points and went as far as they could, including towards Kiev. And after a month or change, that didn't work. Went as close to the city, and now they have a good indication of how strong the Ukrainian defenses are. They expended a lot, but the Ukrainians also lost some. That was a good gauge. Plus, you attack from different directions. That will dilute the enemy's forces. Where after the Russians pulled away from Kiev, that whole region, and they circled all the way down to the Donbas, which is where I suspect they really initially wanted to go, because they wanted I think the Russians wanted the bottom half or the eastern parts of Ukraine, which is what I think they wanted. I'm not sure that if you can take out, or if they could take out Kiev in one go quickly, so be it. But if not, let's redeploy and go where they really wanted to go. I'm not sure Kiev was ever material to their plan, but it was one of those. If it works, it works, and if it doesn't, we'll just go with what we're really trying to do, which I think is the Eastern Territories. But it's a little hard to it's hard to guesstimate. It'll be an interesting forensics when that war is over. But it does seem that there's a lot of okay. What you mean? I was right with my ideas on Russia and the. Well, Machine, you're probably usually right, aren't you? I mean, you're right when sober. Okay, I'm just kidding. But I don't think that has been done yet. But again, we're back to what lessons can we learn? William sent me an interesting question. That's what makes World War II so interesting, is we can speculate 200 ways from forever on what did happen if something else had been done instead. Was if the Germans had gone straight to Moscow, no Ukraine, nothing, just straight arrowhead in to Moscow, would that have ended the war right there and then? There you go. It is one of those questions that are somewhat subjective to opinion, because and to some degree on facts, because we have to agree on what the facts are. The war between Germany and Russia was inevitable. If there's anybody who wants to disagree with me on that, feel free to disagree with me, or forever hold your peace. I believe that war was going to happen. 41, 42, it was going to happen. Russia and Germany would not coexist. There's the one thing that was I don't think most of the German leadership initially, including Hitler, did not want war with England. They might not even want war with France when they get their territories back. They wanted war with Russia. Russia and the communists were the enemies, and that's been the one stated goal ever since the 1920s for them. So that was coming, and it's hard to kind of dial it back. Czech, yes, they wanted Czechoslovakia. They might have done a temporary deal with Poland if the Poles would. Goering worked very hard on getting the Poles online against Russia, and there was some progress towards that. Of course, they wanted the corridor to Danzig, and I keep hearing myself say they wanted the corridor to Danzig when the Russians, they probably wanted their corridor into their into the Black Sea port that nobody was going to give them except they had to take it. But the Poles had a change of leadership at that point before, some years before, and that was just not, they were not going to negotiate. The Poles were not going to negotiate and side with the Germans towards the Russians. If they had done, would that have eventually would that lose Polish sovereignty? That's an interesting question. Yeah. Oh, hang on. Hang on. I'm just, I can't do any short answers. You know that. If Germany in World War II had gone straight to Moscow, then Putin and so forth. Yes. As you know, William, that's for the same reason that I can't do speed dating. I can't introduce myself in less than an hour and a half. I can't answer a simple question, yes or no. I have to break it down in detail so you know why I will say yes and no. Because there's a case for both a yes and a no. And you're going to get the case of both a yes and a no. So there you're going to be stuck with it. All right. You'll say yes. Well, okay. Russia would have pulled their government back to behind the Urals if Germany had gone all out towards Moscow, which the High Command wanted, which Halder wanted. It was Hitler that wanted to go south to get to the grain and get to the oil. And even Stalin said, when he was surprised when the German High Command misled Hitler, which I'll say they did, and went straight for Moscow. Stalin was surprised because he thought what Hitler would have done would have gone south, which is what Hitler wanted to have done. There was large forces of Russians amassing in their eastern territories facing Germany. There was a buildup going on. It wasn't ready yet. Stalin wasn't ready to make his advance west. So like I said, that brings us to why this was going to happen regardless. So let's say the German army had gotten Hitler on board and they had gone 100% towards Moscow. They would probably have gone there some weeks before, beating the weather. And if it had been a concerned effort, properly dedicated and equipped, which is a whole different logistical conversation. If the logistics had been with them, if they gotten there sooner, the logistics would have been with them if they hadn't diverted towards Ukraine. However, they would then also have walked in a straight line with Russian forces to the left and right. You can't just go straight into Moscow without having to fan out and protect your flanks, because there was millions of Russians on both sides. So initially, he would have to have taken everything to destroy or at least hold the Russian forces, then for a spearhead to continue towards Moscow. And let's say he had gotten to Moscow earlier, before heavy winter set in or was provisioned for it, and had taken Moscow. I'm not sure it would have ended the war. It would probably have ended Stalin, because it seems, again, propaganda, so on and so forth, that Stalin would have stayed in Moscow. But the government had already evacuated to the next city over, which I do not remember right now the name of. So there would have been a functioning government if Moscow had fallen. And remember, Napoleon took Moscow, he just couldn't hold it. Germany could have taken Moscow, and then we would have had the winter. Then they would have been stuck there with long supply lines. And Stalin being dead, having been taken, or let's say been taken, this could have played out in different ways. Number one, the Germans could have captured Stalin or killed him, or he could have died fighting or taken his own life if Moscow had been surrounded or fallen. That would have left possibly a more competent leadership for Russia and a more competent government. Would that have led to a fall of communism? Well, you'd still have the people around Stalin, but if he was, as the figure would have fallen, he would probably have taken some of the top communists with him, and there would have been a change of leadership regardless. Would that have put in more competent military leaders since they were at war? Probably. Would that have given the Russians the ability of fighting the war uh, more competently? Probably. So if Russia had fallen, Stalin had fallen, Russia may have actually stayed in the war because Germany really couldn't, for the same reason Russia can't take all of Ukraine unless there's a complete collapse and hold it. Russia can't really, Germany couldn't really take all of Russia and hold it because it's a big country. And if they moved everything back behind the Urals and they had been successful in bringing their production back behind the Urals, there actually would have been a viable Russia to fight for. Um, so, by that sense, Russia could have stayed in the war. The other side of that coin is with Stalin gone, just like William just said, I saw if Stalin had died, being the father of Russia, the drive, like you said, the driving force behind the Communist Party, that would have, yes, it could have brought a collapse. But Stalin and his henchmen, and you can think like in any dictatorship, everything is led by a small nucleus of people. And the communist Russia was most certainly not any different. We're looking at that little 1%, many of them centered in Moscow, that could have been taken out by this. Some would have fled, some would not have. But with Stalin gone, the leading figure would have been gone. But he wasn't a popular leading figure. He was popular by some in Russia, but by many other Russians, he was seen as the tyrannical dictator that he was. He starved millions. Many more people were killed under Stalin than were killed during an actively fighting the Second World War against the Germans. So having Stalin and die and Moscow fall may have been able to solidify Russia behind a different, more democratic leadership, but again, somebody else. Somebody else could have stepped up and filled in those shoes. It could have lived into the Duma would still have survived. So there could have been a small internal cleanup in Russia, and then they could have sued for peace because, well, Germany's war goals was to get rid of communism. And if Stalin was killed and died and disappeared, and the top of the Communist Party disappeared, there could have been a rise within the nationalist in Russia that could then have sued for peace, and some sort of coexistence could have it could have ended the war. It's very hard. It could have gone both ways. There's a lot of what ifs on that one. That's the other thing. What would the Japanese have done? The Japanese have just done a peace treaty with Russia because, well, Germany didn't tell them they were going to invade, just like Japan didn't tell them they were going to bomb Pearl Harbor. It was a very strange alliance that didn't really have a whole lot of communication going on. When if the Germans had taken Moscow and Stalin would have fallen, or the Russian government under Stalin would have fallen, maybe that would have motivated the Japanese to start moving west, seeing that there was now a chance of actually dividing up Russia. And again, the Russians would also have seen that possibility if Stalin and Moscow had fallen, and again sued for peace. I think that was the initial objective, was a line much further back where there was an existence of Russia behind it. Hitler said on several occasions he wasn't planning on occupying the whole country, just taking enough of it of what he needed. I can't remember the entire verbiage, but that is sort of what the intent was, to have a rump state of Russia exist from the Urals and east of that. So the Germans would have taken a negotiation of a surrender. the Germans could also have listened less to Rosenberg and actually invaded Russia to the east as liberators and not as what it turned out. But that is, like I said, there's a whole lot of nuances of how the Eastern campaign could have gone differently. Lend-Lease, Lend-Lease. No, I don't think Lend-Lease started until 41, because Russia had invaded, or what's called Finland. I think that was 40. So Russia was not entirely a big part of they were not, as Churchill would have said, it was the lesser of two evils. I don't think there was a whole lot of trust or love for Russia by any of the Western allies. So they didn't actually start sending them stuff until they were actively engaged against their common enemy, at that point, Germany. Yeah, that's very true. The Ukrainians have ever since the 20s, or certainly in the early 30s, hated Russia and hated Stalin and hated the communists because of what the communists. Remember the Great Famine? A third of all Ukrainians was deliberately starved to death by Stalin and his policies towards the Ukraine. So there was no love lost of Ukraine towards the Russians, and which is something that lasts still till today, where you see a lot of Ukrainian the hatred towards communist and Russia is far bigger than it was towards the Nazis during the occupation of the Second World War. That's why there were so many Ukrainians that willingly signed up for the SS. Most of the prison guards in the labor camps and concentration camps around Europe were run by Ukrainian guards. It wasn't like they were not sympathetic, and certainly more because, again, we're back to the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Question. I see a question. Do I think Soviet Union can be blamed for World War II as much as Germany? I mean, you're looking at two dictatorships that has opposing ideologies, even though it has a lot of similarities. I mean, when you have a national socialists like Germans and the communists like the Russians at that time, there's almost no way the conflict wasn't going to happen. It's the left-right struggle that is going on in every country today. But if it goes to the next level and it becomes a left dictatorship or a right dictatorship, and they live next to each other, it's almost impossible for a war to not happen. I'm not going to blame the Russians so much for World. I would rather blame the French and the British and the Americans for World War II than I will blame the Russians, because, well, the Russians are the communists that they always were, and they didn't make peace with Germany during World War I. Very favorable, also because they had no choice. The armies were beaten in the field, and the Germans were standing not far from St. Petersburg. They had a lot of territory towards the end of World War I. But then you bring in the peace in the West and the Treaty of Versailles. And with the Treaty of Versailles, the way that was done, taking all of German territories, 40% of Austria, deciding they were not allowed, Austria and Germany were not allowed to have an Anschluss, occupying the Ruhr, the Rhineland. There's no way Germany was not going to go in the direction they were going to go, because as a response to the Treaty of Versailles. Treaty of Versailles just gave Germans too much ammunition. And I think that is more to blame than the Russians in itself. If the Nazi socialists, if the Nazis had followed Goebbels' initial inclinations before he actually was adjusted right by Hitler, if you will. Goebbels was pro. He wasn't. He saw himself as a friend of Russia, not a communist, but he was a very complex person, and it doesn't get any easier the more we break him down. But if there had been a National Socialist friendly to Russia, would Russia then have eventually started the war? Oh, that's an interesting question, because if you had Nazi Germany without the intro, but the whole concept of Nazi Germany was expansion to the east to get living room, to get the territories back in all directions that they had lost at the end of World War I. So let's say the Germans take Poland, they take Czechoslovakia, and they hold. But the moment they do that, they had a peace treaty with Russia in place, and Russia was still building up for a war, either aggression or defense. The war was going to happen, but blaming it on the Russians if the Germans hadn't had the stance they had. I'll give that to a toss-up. That's actually an interesting question. I would say the war, under the circumstances and the leaderships, the war was inevitable. I would rather, I will definitely blame the actions of the Allies at that time more so than blame the Russians. They had their own revolutions. They weren't good people. They did what they did. However, all right, now that I have time to think about it, Russian-style communism, Marxism, its very intent is to be international and to spread. The Russians always wanted communist revolutions in all countries. See this one. So by that definition, they were a threat to Germany and the rest of the world. Communism has always been a threat to the rest of the world and to world democracies, because it is by very definition, by very nature, is to spread. So the Russians would eventually have started a war or a revolution, one way or another, and which is one of the things that the Nazis or Hitler had recognized as the necessity for a preemptive war. So you could say sooner or later they would have done it one way or another. And you can see communism today in its diluted form of socialism is the main threat to people's individual freedoms. So okay, I hope that clarifies a little bit more. Let me read some more, and if you want me to clarify on that further, write me there. Would I like to chat with a museum curator when you come home? Which museum director? Sorry, I haven't. Which museum director? I haven't really. I'm sort of trying to scan through these through the chat as I'm kind of talking. Give me what museum? I'm sorry. Carrying a couple of different conversations. Give me a little more information on that one, Patrick. Yes, you're right. They were all sort of socialists to begin with. Reading comments or questions. Finally, yep. Kind of comments played. Yes. Patrick, that's. I mean, thank you. Very cool, Matt. Reading comments. Really good. Tick breaks things down very, very nicely. I do agree. Somebody's been picking on him, and I don't want to why. Why did Poland seem to get the worst treatment in both wars? Poland has always been the butt of everything. It was kind of the problem with Poland is they're caught in between two empires that used to own them. The Russians wanted them, and the Germans had them. So therefore, there could be some nationalist cause, both from the east and the west, that Poland actually belonged to them, and therefore wasn't regarded as legitimate. Do get the quotations of what I'm saying there. Um, I think that they really were just in the way. Can't stump. Nope. I think that's it, because Poland literally had been sort of occupied and owned by both empires at different times, who both wanted them back. So by getting rid of them, uh, hopefully maybe both the East and West will get them back. To communitize the whole of the world, indeed. Yes, they did. I mean, just look at the influence of communist Russia throughout the entire Cold War and their census spread. Look how the Chinese are spreading all over. They're doing it differently. Look at the legacy of the Cold War, of how the Russians and how the communists have funded all these green parties all over the world, that is undermining Western economy. I mean, it's still a thing. Marxism is still very much a thing. Yeah, I feel bad for Poland. That's why the first movie I ever made was about what happened to Poland. And the funny thing is, sold all over the world except to Poland. They stole it and put it on a couple of free websites, but they never actually pay for it. Thanks, Poland. Well, I dare say the Poles, they actually kind of owe me. There's not that whole lot of Westerners that makes feature films about what happened to Poland for the Polish to then steal it and dub it without my permission. At least someone in Polish is buying me a damn cup of coffee for that. I'm trying. Germany should have finished the British before taking on Russia. Britain should have stayed the heck out of this war and not gotten involved in the first place. I hate to put it that way. That's a very long conversation. Can be said that England and France created Hitler. Yes, and England and France and people, they also created Churchill. And question is, if Churchill hadn't been where he was and who he was, would there have been an active war with England in the sense that it would? I am not so sure. There was a very anti-war sentiment in England at the time, which I go over in a lot more detail in a video from, I think, last year. And I think that's something that history really hasn't explored enough, because I'm not a big Churchill fan. I'm really not. I think Churchill cost the British Empire most of what it had, and I guess what's going on in England today will cost them the rest. But I guess within my lifetime, we'll see a complete destruction of the Commonwealth. I think that's fairly safe to say, especially with the royal family that is in England today. And then you can tell me, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? I like tradition, but I like the Danish queen. She was cool. Her princes are kind of cool. One of my guys had no idea what happened to. Yeah. Well, all mine died, and the others ended in Hamburg and then Bernard. Thank you, Andrew. Do you like my backdrop? This is the closest I will ever get to the Oval Office. That's probably a good thing. We can't have too many opinions. Can't have too many independent thinkers going on in there. I think that's one thing we should teach, is independent thinking. Local museum in charge. Oh, yes. I will not be able to make it to Norway this time. I know that much, because I will have run out of money by the time I get there. I do hope I can get Norway, Sweden, Finland in the autumn. It's been a crappy year. It really has. Between January and April, YouTube dropped 80% in commercial revenue. No idea why, sort of holding. But what I thought I was going to have to travel with, I didn't. So it's going to be a shorter trip than I had hoped for. So, and hopefully, I'm also trying to figure out about the Ukraine thing. But again, it does really boil down to money, because much as I love to do what I do, I actually do have to pay rent. I don't know why. I think historians should be exempt from paying rent. Except then there will probably be more historians. William, brother, that is what I'm here for. If I was not a stupid muppet with a bad hair day who'd go in front of a camera and answer questions, then I, you shouldn't have to ask them. You can answer anything you want, as long as I get to make fun of people who run the education system or governments or internet or the CIA or other people. Well, we don't talk about that. I don't know. I'm reading. See, that's why at some point I need someone to clear this up. Hitler was at fault for. Hitler was the fault for the other dissolution soldiers World War One. You could see the amount of dissolution soldiers in Germany that rose into World War II to take revenge. If it hadn't been for Hitler, it would have been somebody else. If there wasn't have been one entity to be able to unify the German right or the German left, either way, it would have had to, one way or another, deal with the Treaty of Versailles. And you can see that is why, ever since World War II, there has been this complete shift in information and information control, and the control of history is you literally do not want to talk about things. We don't want to take the chance that there's anybody having independent conversations anywhere that might question the status quo and have anything like that happen again, which is by silencing or if you silence any kind of free and open exchange of information and ideas, you are going to inevitably lead to the exact same situation that you had before. Because you take away freedom of speech, you are embarking on a dictatorship, and there will be people that will rise up against that sooner or later, and that is sort of the only hope we really have left. Ooh, I would absolutely love to when I get a chance to get out there, and I really kind of hope I will have a chance to get out there. Poland has better pastries than France. You know what, William? I don't remember the pastries in Poland. I don't. I feel I don't really know why. I guess they weren't. I never really did pop by a bakery. Poland have great food, but bakeries I didn't actually find one. But I'm gonna have to. Canadian museums have a D-Day friend. Yes, I am hoping to get down to Normandy. Considering I just finished a movie about Normandy, I should go. Patrick, thank you. What the hell is a super sticker? Patrick, I'm going to shoot you an email before I go out to Jonastal about what we talked about, but that's a different story. And thank you. Something is up. Poland has great sausage. That's what I call Polish sausage. I wish I could run these on all of them on the screen. It would be more fun. Well, you can all see them anyway. Poland questions. Do I plan to put videos together? Yes, and of course, Roger and I got more that we already filmed that we'll put together and do some more live streams. And I'm hoping that I can time it to. We have a couple places we talked about seeing when I get out there. It's all about timing, and I'm starting in Eastern Europe and driving all the way around back, trying to make everybody's appointment. There's some people I have to meet with that we have to see these places with. So yes, and I'm absolutely going to go see George as well in Jonastal and Roger, and hopefully I'm going to see Ludo as well. Although I haven't even warned him yet. There's some questions we've asked over this past 6 months that I really need to go to places and clean up. Poland actually was the first to break the enigma. The idea was built by the concept was made by a Polish designer, and it was sitting in a box in the British archives for years before they actually pulled it out and realized what it was. I'm reading Churchill. Yes, I like it. Have I been to Marienburg? Marienburg. Uh, I don't think so, Michael. Where is which? I guess I haven't. Otherwise, I'd probably known. England would have fallen without Canada. Um, Again, it shouldn't have been a war in the West at all. It should have been avoided. It's like World War I should have been avoided. Um, yes, and you're absolutely right. This is the one thing. The Poles would never have stood up and not done a deal for the Danzig corridor or even collaboration with Germany if it wasn't because they thought the French and the British would actively actually go help them, which they absolutely did not do. Yes, they declared war, and that promise led to the Second World War in the West. Something that I actually do believe could have been avoided. But okay, at some point you have to draw the line somewhere with people who are embarking on war. You can't just let them keep rolling over you like we have seen certain governments do over the past couple of decades. You cannot just you have to stand up to bullies, whether they be Chinese or Russian or the media. Um, mm, what? I wouldn't be damn well surprised. Um, thanks, thanks. I thought it was kind of cool. Yeah, let's destroy history some more. I mean, hell, some of the special research sites in Jonastal, they literally built a fucking factory on top of. They destroyed everything. Um, yeah. Um, yes. I mean, it's seemed to be a solidified. YouTube seems to be solidified now, but the first 4 months of this year was a nightmare. Um, um, yeah, William, but I'm not using them much. Um, I will say one thing about YouTube is their customer service have gone better. They are they are responsive more. I will say that to if there's anything and there's more communication. I will say I will say that. I mean, it is what it is. The algorithm is whatever it is, and I seems a little strange that every week I see more people signing up, but the number of subscribers remains roughly the same. When I see other history channels, they have a million followers or 300,000 views of something that I would say is less detailed information. But if people that can't find me, if they can't see, double click on the bell. Some people get kicked off. I don't understand what happened. I can't. Well, I can't fight it. Now I'm going to be arguing with the CIA about their documents. So it's not like I don't have enough fights on my hand. And then the Austrians, but uh, yeah, I'm a little bit behind in reading here. Um, all right. Yes, we'll eventually upgrade with a cute narrator named Cindy with a capital C and H. It's an old TV show joke that no one will get because you haven't seen it. All right, talking about potato. Talking about food. Talking about food. Have you seen any of Alexander Clark's channels? I have not because I quite frankly don't have time to watch what anybody else is doing. I haven't even. Speaking of what anybody else is doing, With the History Underground, uh, I need to send him an email, don't I? Yes, I do. There's a couple of channels I'm going to be trying to do a um, collaboration with coming up this year. I'm meeting with some of the guys out in Germany who have channels as well, so we can work together. I really had hoped that I was going to get a chance to go to England soon and see Drakinefeld. And I was also certainly hoping to do something with History Hunter, but we are not in the same time and place at the same time this year. Um, so it'll all happen, but I mean, we're all doing stuff. Speaking of, Joseph P. Farrell is alive and well, and him we all love. And I just wrote him, asked him. He has a live today at 2:30 Central Time. Joseph is live, so you may want to jump on him since he is off ban. And I'm just texting and writing here with him right now. Oh, apparently my computer can't figure that out. The simple task of writing a message. His pre-chat starts at 1, and then his chat is good. All right. Sorry, just wanted to tell you that Joseph. Yes, I was going to. We had a tentative possibility of Joseph having joined us here today. However, because he has his own live chat coming up in a few hours, Central Time, 2:30 Central Time. That's coming up soon. He's doing his own, so he couldn't join me here today. That's kind of what I had. I was kind of hoping to bring him on, and I also wrote my old interpreter, my buddy who's running around in the Ukraine. If he wanted to, he's running around with a rifle out on the ground there, and he did not write me back. However, somebody else did. Said, "Hi, Jack. I just got off the plane. My name is not Jack. We have really got to do something about the spam stuff." Wanted Igor to come on and talk about things from the ground in the Ukraine as well, but he did not respond. Which, when you spend your days clearing landmines and shooting at Russians, that's kind of your communication is a little sporadic. So if anybody else is sitting out in the Ukraine that I know of that wants to jump on and give me on the ground view, please do. And just it'll be a thing, and it'll last for a while. I'm still, again, depending on History Hunter he's a really good guy. I like him, and I've been annoyed that it's been so long. I guess that whole lotto thing I was trying to win didn't materialize yet, so we can all go do the things we want to do. Yes. One of these days. Yes. That was another thing I was kind of hoping on doing have not done it yet. Going out to the East Coast and doing a series on the Civil War forts, Civil War and War of Independent forts. I want to do a little bit more on the Civil War because, as we all know, the most history of any war seems to have not exactly been reported correctly, and also some of those construction designs must have been inspired a little bit by the Brialmont design because they were built. Civil War pre-Brialmont. I want to see the Civil War forts because it's a part of the history that we really need to work on. And I'm working on a mini-series on the West Wall as well, which is a lot more and a lot different than you have probably all been told, unless you've really dug into it. You're still looking at over 20,000 bunkers facing France, and most of this was started construction in 1924, way before Hitler had anything to do with it. But ever since the Second World War, the Germans had done everything they can to literally blow these things up and destroy them. In almost yes, the usual horrible way. If any of you have any experience, or people who have experience working with petitioning the UN, do get in touch with me, because I think we really have to start doing creating a law, an international law of the preservation of all uh, war sites. So individual governments and entities can't just destroy them willy nilly, as they have done so, especially in Germany and Austria, which is absolutely it's a travesty what's been going on in these places. But that's well, we can do what we can do. Um, um, Now, speaking of, have I watched Hunting? Yes, I watched all of Hunting Hitler. I watched the show, and a friend of mine, he knows the producer of it, and actually suggested we get in touch and do a similar thing with the Last Nazi Secret, but actually do it actually looking for something. Um, that's probably not going to go anywhere either, um, because we're back to the mainstream documentaries and why they drive us all so crazy. Um, so we'll see. Um, no, actually, that's the whole thing, Cameron. That Germany is actively uh, taking the full blame for everything, and therefore nothing is worth remembering or talking about. And Austria have decided that they had nothing to do with it, so there's nothing worth remembering or talking about. And any conversation, I mean, we're looking at two countries that actually have laws making it illegal, punishing by prison to talk about certain parts of the war, which we're back to this being completely, France has the same, but it being self defeating. If you cannot have an open and honest conversation back and forth, if you have a German parachute regiment today, honestly, why can't they celebrate the victory of Ebenemal? Why can't they teach those tactics? They damn well should. The German military today would be in very good shape if they actually learned from the lessons they themselves taught during the Second World War. But because of the Second World War, we can't. Oh, we're going to talk about that, and that's ridiculous. I don't care if they're good or bad people or the cause was just or unjust. You learn from them. That's the whole point. You can't just deny them, hide them, and bury them. But that is most certainly what they've been doing. That's what makes it so damn difficult in Germany, because you can't just have the conversation about X, Y, Z. Um, and yep, actually, that's what I wanted. This one, program. Where district channel this? I'm just going to read some of this real through and skip part. Yes, I know. I mean, that's the problem. You're looking at documentaries that has people that are pretending to be like I saw the like I will never ever forget the episode what's it called, the Hitler's Secret Tunnels, where they planted evidence. They lied about where they were. They lied about the maps they found because they were all in places I've been. I've been in the places they were. I knew they were lying about how they presented it, and it's on the History Channel. So how can you take, if you cannot even present history, which is interesting enough? I think real history is real interesting. Even if you have to, it takes a little longer. You can't just do it in a 10-second soundbite. You actually have to talk about it. You have to explain it. You have to show people. There are so many fascinating stories from the wars, all wars actually, even just human interest stories, but also on the bigger tactical. That if you break away sometimes the political ramifications and the implications and the politics of some of these inventions, just look at what happened in a given area. These are fascinating. You don't have to embellish. You don't have to lie. You don't have to make it up. And that's why I don't understand, why are these people making it up? Why are the TV networks? Why are they making up things? Why are they faking witnesses, faking people, faking fines? That it's disgusting for anybody claiming themselves as a historian um, to do that. It's just it's unthinkable. Um, yeah, hunting camel would be. I'm very much looking forward to meeting the with the general's family. I would say. Um, but yes, I know you. Crystal, I know they do it for ratings, they do it for the quick soundbite, but you know what? And again, it's like, why don't I have 1 million followers, and why don't I make enough money to travel all over and do this exclusively on this channel? It's just as interesting you can make real content sound just as interesting by just presenting it right. You don't have to make it up. And I would say that there are enough people that are still interested in history, that would be interested in it if it's true. The problem is there are people watching this that thinks it's true, that thinks this is the way, that thinks that opinionated historians who's inserting their personal opinions in every single aspect and documentary they make is the way to go. And then it becomes about a narrative and a storyline. And I just don't think that's, oh God, yes, Al Capone's vault. It's exactly. It's like, I can't promise to find we can't find everything. I'm pretty sure if we were allowed free hands 100% and had the economics to really look, we would find some things that would absolutely stagger people. Which is, again, why else would the CIA deny certain aspects of a FOIA request that is so old? There's nothing in that can be secret, unless, of course, if the results come out to be slightly embarrassing for people who are already dead. And Lord knows it's not like they enjoy a great reputation these days anyway. So what do you have to lose by being open and honest? But that's just me. We'll win the lotto. If you win the lotto, you're gonna go on a world. I need clickbait for the banner. Yeah, I know. Okay. A friend of mine, actually, she did a Google survey, and I thought about doing the same thing, except I can't post a link here that I know of. But I really would like to hear opinions about the little cards and the text. When I make an episode, I always find a photo of the location, and then I'll maybe do a graphic, and I'll put the text on, or I'll insert, like if it's a tunnel and it's Kamla, I'll do a graphic with those two together. But how would you like this to best be presented? I think that the honest way of doing this, and I hate to do the honest way of doing it, but I want to do the honest way by actually showing the little picture about what I'm actually going to be talking about. I think that's the right way of doing it. And I don't know if maybe that's not commercial enough, but I don't know how I see all these cool ways of doing these. But I don't really like any of them, because I think there should be a reflection of what you're seeing. Well, you can talk about, no, you can't do that anywhere, and you probably shouldn't. At least that's something. But the Austrians, there's a lot of things they don't like to talk about. A message board. I can barely figure out how to make my Patreon work. Okay, I'll also go on the picture over here. That's what we should do. We should just stop blaming and just remember what is what. And that's the thing. I think that the thumbnails are, like you said, I would of course like to have more people come in, and also in the headlines. But I think both the headlines and the thumbnails should reflect what the episode is. In the way that if you show something based on documentary footage, you might want to put a black and white screen grab from that footage. But then people look at the thumbnail and say, "Oh, this is going to be black and white archival footage or what have you. And if I'm on location, real, walking through something, it should be a color photo of that location, so people can see, well, that is a reflection of, we're going to see it live or see a walkthrough. That's just the way I think it will be the right way of doing it. It's funny because I actually have I actually have a minor in marketing. It's one of the things I studied. But marketing some years ago and marketing now is not the same animal. You sound the biggest audience. One show, so 10 minutes. I know. That is one thing I know. And YouTube, they keep wanting shorts and short of this and short of that. I just can't do what I do and make it short, because how could I? If we're going to talk about something, I'm working on the DAG episode right now, and I'm starting cutting down from 2.5 hours. But if you want to see what's there, well, then I have to show you what's there. I can do a 30-minute episode of everything, but you will be cut short of what there is to see. And I'm doing a compilation of Kamala's life, which is going to be about a half an hour, which is probably the shortest thing I've ever done. Like I said, I can't do an 8-minute speed datings, because how could I? I can't introduce myself in less than an hour and a half, so it's just impossible. And that's just people. They say, oh, you should go on TikTok and do little teasers. And I think the people on TikTok, no offense to them, I don't think I know a few, but I don't think the people who go on TikTok have the attention span or the interest in sitting down and watching an hour and a half walkthrough of a fort or a bunker. Is my thought. So a quick question on Hitler. I don't think Hitler died in Argentina. I think he was ready to go when he went. However, I know some people like Lawrence that I have, or Cooper, that I have a lot of respect for, who are firmly believing that he did. And I have to go with my gut feeling. I need to see more evidence. And because there's a lot of FBI sightings of Hitler after the years after the war, sorry, that doesn't mean anything, because people still see Elvis today. Just because there's a report of a sighting doesn't mean that's a verified report, doesn't mean there's a photo, doesn't mean it's documented. I'm certain Bormann he did. I'll get to the Tic Tac in a minute. And I just don't, from a psychological breakdown of Hitler, I don't think he wanted to continue living after that point, because I don't think he had anything to live for. And I think that is an important part. What would he have done with himself in Argentina? Could he have gone there? Absolutely. Could he have gotten out of Berlin? Absolutely. We don't need to watch Hunting Hitler's extensive episodes of how, because it doesn't matter how he could have. Of course he could have. Lots of people made it out of Berlin. And if Hitler wanted to, he would have. I just don't think he wanted to. But like I said, at some point in time, I'm going to Argentina. I'm going to have a look at the Analco house and we'll talk to some of the people there, and we'll see. We'll see if I will be swayed by the argument and the documentation. Until I have documentation, I have to go with my gut feelings from what I do know, and that's kind of what I base it on. People are cute. Like cute animals. I always told you, the moment that the Men in Black showed at my door and started explaining to me why I will be killed if I do things that they don't like me doing, then I'll start doing videos of cute dogs playing. Until then, we're just gonna go. Oh, did I? Oh, I'm sorry, Patrick. Well, no, Elvis is fine. It's okay. He's living with Santa Claus. It's all cool. Tic Tac was the Tic Tac. If actually, it'll be more fun if you Google Tic Tac video or Air Force Tic Tac video, you will see live dash cam from the couple of us at the F-15s. I think it was that was chasing a UFO that was shaped as a tic tac, and that's one thing how the pilots termed it. You have the whole onboard conversation between the pilots as they're chasing this thing. There's 3 Air Force videos that were released and by the Air Force verified as real, authentic, where U.S. Fighter jets were chasing UFOs around in one of the most of the Nimitz carrier group. I think they're all carrier based. That was one of the desert as well, I think. But the interesting thing about that is they were verified by the Air Force. They were correct, undoctored videos of jets. And there was a couple of interviews with the pilots, reluctant interviews, because they didn't want to be famous or rock stars. It just happened that way after the videos had been leaked or released in some way. Then, of course, they found out who the pilot was, and then everybody wanted to talk to the pilot, and he became a rock star. And he's a really cool guy, Top Gun pilot, one of them, and talked about it. And he said he didn't know of any technology on Earth that could do what the thing he was chasing had done, which I thought should have been a much bigger story. Again, if we had an independently thinking media, having the Air Force admit that they're chasing things that might be unearthly probably should have been on the front page of every newspaper. And the fact that it just drowned in the chaff is, but that is how well made. That is the real people that throw around the terms propaganda and disinformation, and then it turned into fake news and all that stuff. They throw these terms around, disinformation. They don't actually know what they mean, because what it really means. Yes, I know I need merchandising. I just can't do everything on my own. Squirrel fuss. Oh, fucking squirrels. It's not the first time I've been seen chasing squirrels on my patio with a spatula. Anyway, disinformation, what it really is you have something coming out that will embarrass you, or if you as a government entity know something is going to be released or leaked or will inevitably come out, you start leaking a whole bunch of fake stories that are roughly the same. Some will be verified to be not real. Some of them will be of lesser importance, or you, in order to dilute the information flow. So when the story you really don't like comes out, people will pay less attention to it because now they are already been saturated by all this other stuff, all this chaff that has come out. That's how it works. You see, if you know there's a leak coming, you will put out a whole bunch of other stories, some of them real, some of them not, to spread people's attention from the one you really just like when the bombers went over Germany, they would throw all these little foil chaff straps, all strips all over, so the radar would have an overload and couldn't pinpoint the bomber formation from the chaff. Same thing with media. That's how media disinformation really works, and that's why the term conspiracy theorist was eventually invented by the agency many decades ago, because it's good to have established. It takes some time in public mindset to establish a term. So if you say conspiracy theorist, people, they immediately, because of the way that word has been framed and presented over the decades, people even if they immediately go to tinfoil conspiracy crackpot chasing UFOs and trying to break into Roswell and what have you. That is a way of sidetracking what might be an honest research or an honest question by labeling him something to make people take him less serious. And it's all the same thing. And that's why I think that when they had the videos that come out from the Air Force, I mean, over the past decade, we've been inundated with UFO videos and conspiracies and stories and TV shows that are dedicated to something that is utterly ridiculous, but sideline all these UFOs stories and all this chatter So when a real story actually breaks, nobody really pays attention to it because they're already immune to what they've been hearing for so long. And you see it, the politics use it all the time, name calling, labeling. It's all a way of doing this. It's all a way of diverting real attention away from the real issue that people need to look at. It's politics and psychology and propaganda all work together. You just have to pay attention. And what I always say, the ones whenever you look at or hear the most noisy story, the one that makes the most attention, the one everyone is focused on in the media and the press, talk shows, and all that stuff. Well, that is mostly not the important one. This is where you need to turn around and look the other direction, try to find out what is trying to sneak in under the radar while everybody is looking at this. It's the rope-a-dope, for those of you who know old boxing terminology. All the dogs, puppy dog. Thank you, Brian. I just met a new golden retriever that moved into my building on a cart. I offered my neighbors to babysit half the time I work from home, but they also know they probably won't get the puppy dog back. Anyway, kidding. What is where I come in? Radio show you want on? Where's it? There you go, you meatball. Of course, this is. I'll never get to breakfast. And there's like Crystal, and I love that you're always asking how you can help. The problem is so much of it revolves just around me doing the logistics of of doing an episode of writing it up and you there? Got it. It's don't hear you. It's all about finding the episode, doing the research, writing it up, and oh shit, William, the link I just posted should absolutely be working. Yes, but you don't. I know you do, but you don't know where I'm going with it. I may be going closer to a World War II parallels between Goebbels and some of the things around the world that's happening today. But I'm not getting to that until I get back from Europe, because next week I have drill, and I'm just finishing off episodes much as I can for you guys. Hey, next week I have drill. I have you guys. Christy, the device is not connected. Hey, buddy.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Sweet. How you doing?
So, what do you want?
$1 million. My face on a $1 bill. A toilet seat made of 14 karat gold.
I hear you. Sweet. We all want that.
How you doing?
Hey, William. William, your camera's off.
$1 million. My face on a $1 bill. A toilet seat made of 14 karat gold.
I hear you. All right. William, turn off the sound on the. Somebody's playing YouTube next to it.
Yeah, somebody's playing YouTube.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I told you I would help you and do anything you needed to do. I do a crap load of research now. You can also get places where they do the T-shirts and stuff like that, and they ship them out.
You're talking to one of them.
Hang on, let me get you up
Hi,
on.
Machine. Hi, Paul. Hi, William.
Where
morning.
are you? How do I?
Crystal.
Gino.
How do I upgrade you? Hang on, I'm trying to
Oh
open
my
you
God!
up.
I want that coffee cup. Except I
Why
want it
can't
in a
I,
metal cooler.
All right, show again. Radio.
Yeah. Oh, hey, how are you?
I mean, I could walk around with a T-shirt like that on at Fort Benning, and GIs would be asking me, "Hey, where'd you get that? What is that all about?" Be surprised what you can
Well,
advertise.
considering I don't even have one, so yay.
That one is yours. It's got to get shipped out.
Yeah, I know.
Do
Where
I
did
see
I
a
get
sandblaster back there?
Thank
I
you,
used to
Bear
be a
Talk.
couple of them actually. There's a lot of
I
equipment.
appreciate it. Yes, we will eventually get to we'll get to the merchandising type
Well,
thing.
I'm
sooner
going
or
to
later.
figure out how to run a message board because that's what we need.
No, I think
Set up a Discord. If Tino
I've
sets
got
up
a
a Discord and invites us and sets up some admin, we can run the bloody thing for you. You just tell us what you want putting in.
I want a young blonde secretary with a plaid skirt. Is that an option? Is that part of?
I'm not young and I'm a dirty blonde.
Fine. Well, either then
Well, I
there's
think
that.
Russian mail order brides are kind of out right now.
Wait, I thought I was your damn secretary, more or less.
I was just gonna say, I would think there would be an influx of Ukrainian single women fleeing the country coming up.
No, I think they're taking up arms and shooting.
I'm thinking the price of mail order brides go down in a war zone. It may just be me.
Yeah, but if you get one of them missing a leg, I mean, is it going to be half off?
I'm not ordering a parts kit here.
Oh my God, Machine, that was bad.
Build a woman.
I just need a maid. I don't care about anything else.
What's that, William? William, say that again.
I just need a maid. I don't need anything else. I'm too old for that stuff.
I mean,
I just need a maid. I'm too old for that other stuff.
I mean,
God, a maid would be so nice.
Well, I've been constantly looking for maybe a 19-year-old French maid.
If I get a maid, I want one from Thunder from Down Under. Oh, baby, yes.
One of my friends who actually started the Chippendales.
No, I'm sorry. Chippendales ain't got nothing on Thunder from Down Under. I know 4 of them.
Well, might as well just go with the full Monty then.
Not if the guys look like that. No.
I will say that we only have to worry about mail-order brides for the time until they get a green card, and then you don't have to worry about them. They'll find someone with more money than. I'm just saying.
But remember, one of the things you got to make sure of is make sure that they do not speak English. That way, you have no clue when they're complaining.
Trust me, if they're Eastern European women, you will know that they're complaining, regardless if you understand the language.
If they're women, period, you will.
Frying pan is universal.
Complaining, because when I start complaining, I start throwing things.
Being beaten by a bat usually is not very is not exactly going to be a secret, regardless how you twist and turn it.
But no, if you start a Discord channel, Discord is free.
That way, when they get real mad at you, you just tell them,
on there, and you can you get some moderators, and we could pretty much run it for you.
Well, one of the things. Oh, here we go. Let's get Paul back. One of the things I was thinking about doing that I've been wanting to do, which will lead up to that, is when I get out to Europe, I'm going to look for some of the. I'm going to find a location that we all want to see, and then I'm going to go through it, do a live from there. Like I was talking about doing it from the Henge, because most of that is above ground. It would be very long and probably a little boring, and somebody would have to sort of narrate, because if I'm filming it with my phone, literally using that as the camera going through these places, then somebody would have to tell me what the questions coming up are. But that's one of the things I was saying. Of course, the problem is most of the locations we look at are underground, so I can't do a live from there because we won't have any reception.
Unless we have a repeater.
Unless I have a repeater sitting at, but even if I mean,
But
even if
you
I
got
did,
to have electricity for the repeater, and that sounds like you got to have somebody else there to run the repeater.
No, not necessarily. The ones that we were using, I've actually had my hands on them before. They are basically no bigger than, like your cell phone or cigarette pack or whatever else like that, and they're battery powered. And you can get them. I mean, they go from like 50 watt, 100 watt. They put out some serious power.
Would you say Army Navy?
What's that?
Get them at an Army Navy store?
No.
you talking about jetpack?
Yeah, I'm still waiting on mine. Where was I getting that? Where were we getting that stuff? Where we get all of our camera gear for like the radio show and stuff like that. There's places everywhere where you can get them. It doesn't repeaters. You can get repeaters at Army Navy, but good luck. And they're usually the ones that were made in Vietnam and weigh about 300 pounds.
Honey, I have Ranger Joe's in my town, less than 10 minutes from my house.
So that works. I like it.
Oh, Tino, they got those jackets in.
That's I already sent him something.
Karen Hall, yeah.
Okay.
You know what?
But she
Kind
called me back, said they've got the jackets in too. So
I was trying to get him on the show from the Ukraine now, but I sent him some stuff that I found already. When we talk about repeaters, are we talking about just a jetpack? Would that work? But the problem with the jetpack is it has to see the sky, and then it has to sort of see me, because if I start turning too many corners in a bunker or underground, will a repeater even work?
Yeah, you're talking about line of sight. Some of those, they still do work by line of sight, but they do have they emit one really strong signal. Some of them are guaranteed without line of sight to be good for a few hundred feet or more. So if you had a couple of these, even if you had one on your belt and you had one that was hitting another repeater and then going up, you'd have a delay, but it shouldn't be a big one. I'd be surprised if it'd be more than a few seconds worth of delay.
Yeah, I mean, the delay, that's fine. It's just like a lot of this stuff is underground. But there are places like someone just suggested Kainhal, that's in a forest. I could maybe visit Goebbels' house, Himmler's house, places like that. That would be above ground with a good cell reception. That could absolutely work.
Well, same thing with. Where exactly are you going? We didn't pinpoint that yet. Where you're going, because I got ideas. If you're going towards the Wurzburg area, I can point you to some places.
Giebelstadt.
We'll start pointing. What the hell?
I told you about.
I told you about where you were going.
I told you about Giebelstadt. That's where at U2, they had U2s there. And Giebelstadt was not even on a map during World War II, because they supposedly had the 262s there. There's supposedly a airfield underneath the airfield, because that's where my ex-husband was stationed at with a Patriot unit.
It's very interesting because I've heard a lot of underground shelters, quite a few, Germany, Poland, Ukraine, that had the same ramp elevator up, had a very small opening with a ramp elevator up like the ME-62, like Rheineck, that mountain.
Well, the air intakes are still being seen.
See,
they have not done anything to the concern. When the Patriot unit left, they left it alone.
The problem is we have to, We just have to get in there, and that's because they have covered stuff up. There's a few ways we may be able to actually find some of these locations, and I've gotten a lot of reports from people who lived there and grew up there, have seen things, a lot of coordinates, but it will at some point in time boil into digging. But if there's an air intake, if there's a ventilation, if there's anything above ground that the Germans haven't destroyed, definitely. But again, it's not going to bring. It's not going to be alive.
They said there was tunnels that went into Giebelstadt from the airfield, and one of them was in their outhouse. Like I said, it's really. They say it's all booby trapped. I don't know if the American military went in there or not, but he was stationed at Giebelstadt, but he was on sites in Wertheim and Kitzingen.
You sent me a coordinate on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Yeah.
I sure did.
Well,
I
said, go ahead.
No.
As you work, carry on.
Didn't they have something to do? They had some not Nazi prisoner of war, but SS prisoners of war over in Hindenburg concern in Würzburg. Machine.
Yes. Yeah. There is. There's. I'm trying to think here because I'm actually going through it in my head at the moment. I know, like I said, I know you said you were going somewhere towards Würzburg. Würzburg was just like like Bremen and several other places in Bavaria. They were bombed, incessantly. But there's outside of Würzburg, there is still areas, battlefield and relics all around it. I'm trying to find the exact coordinates for you, and it has pertaining to what Crystal said as well.
Because I live just outside of Oxenfurt.
Yeah, and that's in between. That's due east, I believe.
Yeah, because when they brought the Patriot in, they brought in the whole bunch, a whole battalion.
Yeah, and there's still forts and stuff like that. Well, everything through Würzburg, Würzburg Castle, stuff like that.
There's a hospital. There's Leighton Barracks.
Yes.
That was the big barracks in Würzburg. There was Hindenburg. There was 2 or 3 more. I just can't remember their names. God, I left there in 90. I'm trying to think. Now, where I was stationed at in Heilbronn, I sent you the coordinates to Waldheim. That's where in 1985, a first stage of a Pershing caught fire and 3 soldiers were killed.
Yeah, I'm looking at my map right now, trying to figure out there was something else I wanted to bring up, but I just don't remember how close it is to that area.
I, by the way, did find a very good app for closer walking around. That's a little bit better. Gets you a little closer to the ground than Google does. It's called Base Map. It's a hunting app.
Base Map?
Base Map. There's a free version of Base Map. And of course, then it does go all over the world. And I noticed if I pull up the same location with Google and with Base Map, like I said, it's free to use. You can also pay for it, and then you get closer. But it will get me a good deal of slightly closer to an object than Google Map will.
Oh, no kidding.
It's a Base Map. And it's not gonna. It's not the. It's not gonna. Can't count the flowers, but you're getting better.
Batterheim Military Hospital is only about 2 hours due north of Würzburg. Or I'm sorry, due south.
Is it still military? Is it still operating?
I'm sorry.
Is it still operating?
Some sections of it are. A lot of it has been tore down. I can get you the photos and the aerials that I have of it. strangely enough, the reason that's where they pronounced my great grandfather deceased.
Oh,
It was
Flagerhorst was one of those concerns.
Fliegerhorst.
yeah.
Yep.
Batterheim was it was a hospital, children's hospital, and I believe the mentally ill. So you know what happened there. It was turned into a military hospital, and that's where he was brought, which is coincidentally 2 hours and around 2 hours away from Wurzburg. But there's a lot of stuff around Batterheim Hospital itself that is pertaining to above ground World War II.
Okay.
Interesting.
Tino, Fliegerhorst Giebelstadt was one of the first Luftwaffe airfields being established in 1935. During World War II, it was a reserve airfield in the rear area of central Germany. Later, it was a key defensive airfield as part of the defense of the Reich campaign, where Messerschmitt's Me-262 jet fighters assigned to the field intercepted Allied bombers attacking Germany.
Yeah, by Wunstorf. Or the
That's by
Warming.
Würzburg. That's what, 25 clicks south of Würzburg?
Yes.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, somewhere around that area. And then
because I used to drive to Kitzingen for commissary, and then when they built the new one in Würzburg at Leighton Barracks, I would go there to the commissary.
well, and the path that you would take, Tino, from Wurzburg to Batterheim goes right through. Let's see here, Ludwigsburg, Stuttgart, Herrenberg,
Well,
Rottenburg.
that's still an active airfield, isn't it?
Part of it is. Part of it has been abandoned. Let me see if I can bring that back. Bring that up though.
There's the Wikipedia on Giebelstadt.
Even though it's been abandoned, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not under the control of the Luftwaffe or the Wehrmacht. It's like in the UK, we've got abandoned airfields all over the place. Ex-US ones, ex-British ones, ex-whatever. And most of them are still MOD property unless they've been sold for building on. So you can't get access. It's like, where I am in North Wales, we've got RAF Valley, which is a pilot training base. There are 3 airfields around it, which were pilot airfields for it. One of them is
not far away.
Still called Mona, RAF Mona. People fly out of there in light aircraft, but there are days where Mona is closed because it's being used by the RAF for their fighters to do circuits and loops and going around the mountains, doing the Sunset Loop and stuff like that. So there's areas which are, you look at it and you think, oh, that looks really cool. And you go along and you can't actually get into it because it's like, oh, no, MOD property.
Some of the guys I watch, Paul, they go around all those places and find their ways in.
Yeah, there's ways in and everything, but I mean, if you get the MOD police or anything like that, then it's just hassle.
Right.
It's one of those that there's always a way in, but when it's used by the official government or especially the Air Force, they do get kind of pissy with people sneaking in and out.
Just a little bit,
as we will find out this year, regardless.
Yeah.
I'm tired of waiting. I've had enough. It's we're going to do this or we're going to do this before everything else disappears. But there's a certain, when it's like Amstein, there's an enormous amount of tunnels and bunkers around and on the property of Amstein. And a friend sent me a very nice map that he made of all of these locations that he knew from childhood, and he's still living there, of all these underground tunnel structures, and most of them are on military property.
Never
And
fails.
last time I was at Rammstein, they wouldn't even let me in to wash my clothes. So I figure,
Disposable.
Okay, Tino, in 1956, they had a detachment of U-2 reconnaissance aircraft at Giebelstadt.
oh, so it's a fairly long runway. It is a fairly long runway.
Yeah. They had 69th ADA Brigade, which had the Patriot and the Hawk missiles there. They had a unit of Chinooks, or I'm not going to say what I called them.
Flying bathtubs.
No, Chinooks. The road from Würzburg to Giebelstadt is B-19.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I got brought up too.
But it's you can
Well,
still see
81.
the air intakes that are
81 pops up too.
yeah.
Main
There's
Road 81.
air intakes out there that there's nothing else around them. It's like, why is this air intake here? Where is it going? So
That's
but they have not torn down anything there. All of it is still there.
And that's the good thing about some of it being, if it's on an active military field, they may not actually tear down some of the old stuff because they're still using it. But the moment they start thinking about handing it over to civilians, in the UK, probably not as much, but the Germans will certainly do what they can to tear things up before they hand them over, just like they're doing at Jonastal. Sooner or later, Jonastal will be handed over to the civilian world because the shooting grounds there are relatively small for large-scale artillery or bombing, especially considering the German rules and regulations. And we all know how German rules and regulations are so very lenient and way.
Well, that's like at Waldheim in Heilbronn. The only thing that left are, I think, 2 nuke bunkers and part of the airfield.
The interesting thing about
because we had some on the cast site itself, missiles, and then they had another 3 up on the airfield. And the only thing that could really land there was helicopters.
Yeah, but you look at Jonastal, even from above, you can only, the biggest thing you can shoot there is 20 millimeter. And then there's some small ranges, but they don't need to sit on all of this just for that. So they really can't utilize the whole location because it's all too close to cities and populated areas. When the Russians were there, they would sit in one part of the field and fire artillery over the village and into the proving ground, just like we do in Denmark. With the German rules today, they don't like that.
Yeah, they frown upon that a little bit.
On Benning.
So they had time to clean it up for the past many years because they're not using it anyway. And I guess sooner or later it will be handed over, and then it will be nicely cleaned and sanitized.
See, there are 5 places over there I want to go. I want to go to Peenemünde. I want to go to Gatow. I want to see that dang firing position for the big ones. Mm-hmm. I want to see that nuke thingy too. I want to go to Riesa.
To where?
To Riesa. I want to go see the hinge.
Oh.
And I want to go to Jonastal, and I want to go to Posen in Poland. Because that's where my grandfather's family was from.
Yeah, Jonastal is
worth. My goal's worth
all that stuff with Kammler and von Braun and everything about that missiles. It's in my brain because of working on a damn missile. It's like, I want to go see the records up at University of Alabama, Huntsville.
Yeah, I guess the next step now is now to get a lawyer and go to an intelligence court and actually officially sue to get paperwork released, which should not be necessary, but here we are.
Yeah, but how long is he going to be in court?
Well, for until we run out of lawyer money, probably.
Or until we all die.
Oh well, somebody will ask, but it's and it was interesting because if there weren't any document, now I know the way they formulate those responses is that we're not confirming or denying, but we're not giving you anything. By that, the only thing I can read into a response like that is that there is something, but we're not letting you have it, because otherwise they would simply write, "We don't have anything."
Yeah, that's what they do.
I had a question to ask you anyway.
That's the thing with the UK archives. They've got various different time scales for disclosure, and there are some things from World War II which have got a 90-year disclosure thing on it. So, you know,
they'll admit they have it.
We've still, well, yeah, they've got it, and as soon as the 90 years are up, you'll be able to go to the Public Archives Office, and if you can sort through the myriad of rubbish that will be piled in with it, you will find it. But they're all boxed together, and this is all documents which have got 90 years on it.
Can I bring a sleeping bag and lunch? I'll just move into the warehouse. Sleeping bag, lunch, I'll be fine.
I mean, you have to write and get permission to go in there and everything, but you can do research and everything, and as long as it's been declassified.
And the archive haven't burned down.
No, the archives, National Archives are. I mean, there's very little stuff from the First World War, so the stuff I've got of my grandfather's, trying to get information about him is impossible because most of it was lost in the Second World War.
I know the feeling.
But
stuff from the Second World War, in 10 years' time, I'll be able to get my old man's records out. Now, he died 5 years ago when he was 99. But, you know, it's still going to be 15 years after he died before I can actually get hold of any records to find out what he did after he left the RAF and worked in radio counterintelligence.
Now, see, I have a lot of my father's World War II records. I even have paperwork to where he shipped his Lugers back to the States. And I can get some of them, but the problem is St. Louis is where all military records are at. Yep. Personnel records. In the early 1970s, they had a huge fire. And it just tore. My dad had to get all his stuff back together and send 2 mil person in St. Louis to go back into the library. I have all my dad's when he got out, all his promotion stuff. I have things when he went to the 8th Air Force. I mean, my dad was a pack rat. He kept it all. But what I was going to ask you, Tino, who discovered fission first, the German scientist or Fermi?
That was Otto Hahn.
Hahn.
That's what I thought.
Otto Hahn did, and Lisa Meitner did not.
I know we talked about that earlier, remember? Because I asked you about her. Now, this is the thing. Do you think, I believe that at that castle, there was a small atomic explosion. It just, all the hallmarks of all the stories and what I've read and what you've said and everything else. I believe
in which one
did happen. Okay.
Yeah, which one of them? There's been a few.
The first one, the one the lady saw. I can't think of her name right now. And I've
in Jonasson, in Waldorf, in 45. Yes.
Yeah. I believe that happened. Do you think the United States is trying to cover up that we had the Germans, the Nazis had an atomic weapon before the United States did? Because I do think you're right that Oppenheimer and all them used the detonators that came over on that sub.
I
Oh.
don't believe they actually
then-
had a bomb. I believe that they were on their way and really damn close to it.
No,
Yeah.
I think they had one. They
I-
had a small one.
No, I think they were in the partial development of it. If you look at, I mean, I listened to a book. I listened to a book yesterday, actually, about basically the 6 months up to the dropping of Little Boy and then Big Boy, and
Fat Man and
all
Little Boy.
Hmm?
Fat Man and Little Boy.
Sorry, yeah, Little Boy and Fat Man. Sorry, but I mean, all the information that they were giving and everything was talking about how the development of this, that they tested Fat Man, they hadn't tested Little Boy, so they didn't know whether Little Boy was actually going to work when they dropped it. It was just theoretical, because it was a uranium into uranium explosion, whereas Fat Man was a plutonium-based bomb, which was similar to the sort of thing that the
Coffee. I need coffee.
Germans were working on. But also, you had the situation that in 1938, you had German, British, and American scientists who were collaborating by, just like sending notes or
because
sending
von Braun, there was letters that von Braun sent to
between
daughters.
them all, and then you've got the situation that once Germany declared war on the US, Britain passed all of its nuclear research to the States because it would be more secure there, and basically you had the facilities and the wherewithal to, because I mean Britain by then was broke. Because I mean, it's like the first part of the war, Britain was paying all of the stuff that America was shipping over to Britain before Germany declared war was being paid for by the gold reserve.
Yeah, that was part of the Lend-Lease Act.
Yeah.
And no, that was before. That was before Lend-Lease. We were paying for it up front with gold reserves of the British Empire. They were shipping gold from all over the place, including Canada, because it was all part of the empire. Canada wasn't a separate sovereign country as it is now, as Australia is now, as is not New Zealand or all the others. They were all part of the British Empire, not the Commonwealth. And if it hadn't been for the empire, then Britain would have been screwed, because the number of Australian, Canadian, Indian, New Zealand troops who served, there weren't enough British people left after the First World War.
I know they had military in Hong Kong, but
I mean, Hong Kong got taken over. I mean, my godfather was in Singapore and spent the first 2 years of the Japanese captivity in Changi Jail, and then was working on the Burma Railway.
Wow.
And he hated the Japanese until he died.
He would.
Yeah, I knew a lady.
He would not have anything that was made in Japan in the house.
I knew a lady that was the same way. She was captured in the Philippines and put in Santo Tomas. Lieutenant Colonel H.R. Brantley. She was my mother's best friend in Texas when my mom was alive, and then they both passed away. But she would not own anything She drove a Mercedes though, but she would not own anything that had Japanese.
Yeah.
She
I
didn't
mean,
want to
and,
be
and,
near any Japanese. She's one of
and
the
Lord,
founding people of the what is it, Battling Bastards of Baton.
right. Well,
So
Rod would not speak. I asked him once, when he was in his late 80s, what he could tell me about, sort of like how he ended up in Singapore, not necessarily what happened afterwards. And he said, "No, I'm not going to. I can't talk to you about that. I'm not going there." It was like it was something which was cut off. In his memory, there was 1938, and then there was 1946, and what was in
It,
between didn't happen.
isn't that
It ceased to
predominant of that
exist.
generation, though? That they
Yeah,
really
my old
didn't
man.
want to, they didn't come home and talk about it like they do today. It just
No,
didn't happen. It was just gone. And then they would drink it out.
Daddy didn't talk
my
about it.
my old man. I've got his when he got discharged from the RAF as an air gunner, radio officer, wireless operator, for nerve damage to his wrist in 41. That's the only paperwork. He went from there because he'd done electrical engineering at Manchester University before the war. He went and worked on the Black Network and radio counterintelligence based at Woburn Sands, just outside Woburn Abbey, near Bletchley Park. And they were working on Radio Deutschland East, West, and Atlantic, sending out all sorts of stuff, jamming stuff coming in, sending
Yeah.
stuff out on
I can remember
sideband,
in
single
Germany
sideband.
listening to Radio Free Europe.
Yeah, there was all sorts of shows going out and everything. They were sending out. They had programs going out from the Free French, and there were about 7 or 8 different Free French organisations who they had to keep apart because they didn't agree with each other,
Yes.
so that they could broadcast. Get them to do programs to be able to then be broadcast in French, as part of BBC World Service type thing. And they were doing all that sort of stuff. And there are no records of it because they're classified for another 10 years.
It's like I had
And,
to
I'm
beg.
going to be over 70 before I can actually access those, which is
I had
like
to
ridiculous.
beg my Opa to tell me what he did during World War II, where he was. Where I knew he had been captured by the English. And he told me that he was Remagen is where they got him at. He was holding the bridgehead at Remagen. My daddy did not talk about, and daddy was in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. Daddy didn't talk about it. I found out about my dad after he died, and I found his military records. I didn't know about what my mother went through as a little girl in Berlin until about a year and a half before she passed away. And Mama started telling me things. And then it started hitting me that we always had large amounts of toilet paper. My mother never ran out of toilet paper because she said that was the hardest. You couldn't find it in Berlin. And she was in Berlin when the Russians came. I believe my grandmother was raped by a Russian soldier.
My first memory of Eastern Europe is bring toilet paper. I had to stalk into a McDonald's and steal some. I've never gone to anywhere near Eastern. I never go anywhere without a roll of toilet paper anymore.
Yeah,
When
you
Mama
can't go anywhere
died-
without butt napkins.
When Mama died, we used my husband's retirement move to get all her stuff to Louisiana. I didn't have to buy toilet paper for almost a year.
Yes, I go to estate
That
sales every
he
now and
never
again, and I
he
still
never ran out. He never ran out of canned goods. I mean, my biggest heroes are my mother, Miss HR, because of what she went through, and my grandmother, because how in the hell did my grandmother keep my mother and my tante alive in Berlin and outside of Berlin during bombings?
Yeah, it's. I
Kept
mean,
them both alive.
the one of the things that people forget nowadays is that our perspective on things is totally different to the perspective of my father's generation and how they looked at things around Europe, America, around the world. The whole world attitude was totally different. My ex's grandfather, he was in the Hermann Goering Panzer Grenadiers.
Oh
He
wow!
was at Monte Cassino and got dysentery and got told to go to the rear to the hospital. Them expecting him to die on the way, and
He was in
somehow he
Monte
managed.
Casino.
He managed to get
My
away
father
from.
fired at him.
Well, no, he got away from Monte Cassino before before
Oh,
it was
okay.
bombed. But I mean, he was bloody lucky that he got dysentery, and he managed to get himself to the rear lines and get evacuated. Went to
He got really lucky.
Berlin. Yeah, he was really lucky. Got sent to Berlin. While he was there, he married his wife. He originally came from a village not far from what was the German Polish border, and then he was then posted to Arnhem just after the airborne
The Market Garden.
division, Market Garden.
Market
That
And
Garden.
he
was
was
a
there.
joke.
He was in a one of the four-wheeled little tank
Puma.
things with the 20 millimeter
The
cannon.
Puma.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I love those.
he was a forward observation, and he said that when the British landed there, there was no damage at all to Arnhem at all. It was absolutely perfect. And then the SS Panzer lot, which was stuck just the other side of Arnhem, moved in. And with the bombing and everything, Arnhem got flattened.
Yeah.
And he said he was really lucky in that he got separated from his mates after being hit, got flattened, and having to bail out. And heard some talking over behind a hedge, and he jumped over into a bunch of Canadians. And he said, luckily they were Canadians and not Yanks, otherwise he wouldn't be here.
And something else about my
exactly
dad.
what he said.
We Americans
Until
like to shoot
Mama-
at things.
Yeah,
Until Mom told me, I did not know
Never.
my dad still carried shrapnel in his back from a German hand grenade.
yeah.
That they couldn't get it out of his back. It was too close to his spinal cord. And I was like, huh?
It
But I mean,
Is it-
I got
It's a lot of
granddad.
show.
Granddad gave me his history. He had 9 siblings, of which 2 were girls and the rest were boys. And
no.
he and one brother survived the war. His one brother ended up being the chief fire officer of somewhere. I can't remember where because My ex has got the paperwork. But all the others went to the Eastern Front. And he has no idea whether they survived the war or not.
Now, my uncle
what
was
happened to them.
in the 8th Army Air Force. Daddy was in the Army, 85th Infantry Division. I had an uncle, my Uncle Ernest. He was in the Marine Corps, and he was in Guadalcanal, Saipan, all through. He got injured there. And I had my other uncle was in Alaska. Went in to take back the islands that the Japanese took. But they all came back. But you were talking about the Depression, Tino. Okay, my daddy was born in 1913. Daddy lived through Depression. He lost a child during the Depression because he was from Oklahoma. And they moved from Oklahoma to California, and then they came back. And my sister Yvonne, they had some kind of disease from all the sand storms that kids would accidentally suck that sand in. And that's what she died from. And then his first wife died a year and a half later. So it was just like, wow.
So interesting, Paul. Your granddad actually missed our favorite general because he was almost captured at Market Garden. He was there firing, lobbing missiles when they dropped. So he just barely got out. One of the excuses that they actually kept going with that with Market Garden was specifically that they wanted to try to get him after bombing him in Dora, because they knew he was there. And we know that the British knew that there was a couple of German tank units in the area, but they kept going ahead with it. That's the whole thing. But you probably heard about it.
Yeah. Montgomery knew that they were there, but he was such a overconfident prick that
Yes.
he assumed that his plan would get there, and that it's like sending all of the British, Canadian, and American tanks along a single track road effectively.
Yes. Brilliant idea.
It was like, oh, that's all right, we can just steam all the way through there. And it's like, there's nobody out there. And there's like, there's 88s all over the place. There's all sorts of stuff hidden in hedges. And, and you only have to take out a couple of tanks and then they're screwed. And as a result, they made all the targets apart from the last one. And it's quite amazing, actually, how long the paratroopers lasted before they actually said, okay, there's no point in us fighting any longer because we're not going to get relieved.
Yes.
And there's no point in everybody dying, just for, it's not like we're attacking, we're not defending.
That's what happens when you get a little short commander in charge. Monty, he was a bit of a tool.
One thing that ticks me off about Monty, they say, he's the one that defeated Rommel. I do believe Patton was there, and Patton took a good hunk out of Rommel's butt.
Actually, Rommel had already gone by the time Patton had. By the time Patton landed in the when they did the landings, which I can't remember the name of, Rommel had already moved out of North Africa. He'd been recalled. There was somebody else. I think it was his. The person under him was in charge of what was left of the Africa Corps. because they'd basically been chased all the way through up until Tunisia.
Yeah,
And then it
Rommel's ass was surely sore from the pounding, but it wasn't from Patton.
Well, that was one of the biggest
it was
mistakes
from,
Hitler made, was killing. Sorry.
Yeah, it was from Monty.
I mean, a Rommel to me.
Yeah, but the thing with Monty there is that he got all the crude ops for it, but he was in a situation where I can't retreat any further. This is a do or die situation.
Yeah, he had no choice. It was let's do this now.
Well, Monty and Patton didn't like each other.
No, they didn't.
Well, they were prima donnas. Of course, they didn't like each other.
They both wanted to be in the limelight, and that's what you get with when you think of Monty and Patton, you can say both were prima donnas, but nothing like the guy in the Philippines.
Yeah, but
no.
God! Who
Miss
killed
HR.
more people in the Philippines than the Japanese did?
Miss HR hated MacArthur. She hated him.
But the interesting thing about people like MacArthur and Patton and even Montgomery is that when you need things done, you need people like this. People like that, there's no life for them in a civilian life, which, I mean, afterwards, Montgomery was a miserable little prick from anybody who met him after the war, because his time was over. And even MacArthur got into a pissing match. Fortunately for MacArthur, there was the Korean War, so he could get a little bit of glory back, but he got in a pissing match with everybody. And I guess the best thing that could happen for Patton was that he died when he did, because there's nothing for them, for people like that you need to do. Like a real warrior, you put him on a shelf in peacetime, and he's a miserable alcoholic. I've served with people who, before they got deployed, they're miserable, but completely on point when they go. And you need people like that. They just don't get along well together.
A historical example of that is Nelson. Nelson was a superb commander at sea,
but he couldn't handle being stuck
but
on
when
ground.
he wasn't fighting, he was a complete pain in the ass at home.
He might have gotten court-martialed for sleeping around with everybody if he hadn't gotten killed.
Well, I say, I mean, he would have got into a lot of trouble with the affair with Emma Hamilton, Lady Hamilton, if it hadn't been for the fact that he kept winning all these battles, and he was popular. And really, after Trafalgar, there weren't any major sea battles for a considerable amount of time, and it was probably the best thing for him to happen, is for him to be killed in that battle, because he would not have survived afterwards.
And his legacy,
personality,
and his legacy I mean, the same thing with the legacy of Patton. Because MacArthur sort of faded out of history, something that he traditionally said in his last speech he didn't want to do. But that really was what didn't happen to Nilsson, didn't happen to Patton. They almost died at the high point of their career, and that's why we remember them as great people. Montgomery, he sort of disappeared and turned into this forgotten little poison dwarf that anybody who met him after the war definitely wouldn't remember fondly. And MacArthur got sort of drilled out. But if you're a warrior, you want to go out on the top of your game for your legacy.
I know you were saying earlier that
look at Custer. After the Civil War, General Custer, after the Civil War, the only thing he had to be big about was fighting the Indians. Well, he met his Waterloo.
Stonewall Jackson.
Jeb Stuart.
I was just getting ready to say that. You beat me to it.
Jeb Stuart. Hey, the really lost it when we lost Jackson.
My lad's doing history at John Moores University in Liverpool, and one of his areas is American modern history, which is basically the last 200 years, which I suppose is American history, from a white perspective. But he's been doing a load of stuff on the Civil War, and he just had to write a dissertation on civil rights, and how the civil rights movements began, and how people became famous as a result of it. And had to do a shitload of work on it. And he spent like a month mithering my head about, oh, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. I'm going, well, just, do your research, and
It's like
and
here.
eventually I turn around. And he says,
I'm originally from Texas. We didn't have that much to do with. There was a few Civil War battles, a few up in Arkansas, Louisiana, the big one. But during the 60s and 70s, there was not that much civil rights in Texas. Now I live in Alabama.
yeah, well, Alabama
Yeah.
that was one of the heartlands for the civil rights, wasn't it? To some extent, there in
an
Georgia.
hour and a half drive from Birmingham. I'm not far from Anniston. I'm not far from Montgomery. I'm not far from Atlanta either.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I pretty
You're
much
like me in the middle of nowhere.
I pretty much live in the central of the Civil War and civil rights, because it happened all around where I live. And in 5 minutes, I can be in Georgia.
Yeah, and the thing is,
that's if the traffic lights work right.
And when you look at it, all this history that's occurred and reoccurred over the last 2 centuries, it's still happening, because people are not learning from history.
Not at all.
Politicians don't learn from history. I know you were saying that you didn't like Churchill, earlier on, but one thing about Churchill was that he was a historian as well as a politician, and he could see some of these trends. Now, some of the decisions he made during the Second World War, you could say, were absolutely bloody awful. Some of them were because if he had made a certain decision, it would have shown that we had ultra.
Yeah.
And had broken.
Well, he should have learned that when he
made like rope-a-dope,
Gallipoli in World War
Pardon?
I. I said he should have learned that when he went to Gallipoli. And
the thing with Gallipoli, Gallipoli was Churchill actually. There's a misconception with Gallipoli and Churchill, in that Churchill wanted to open a second front up, and his idea was to go through the straits at Gallipoli with the Royal Navy, and it was because they didn't have sufficient minesweepers. That 2 battleships were lost, and if they'd have gone another 200 yards, they would have been through the minefield, and then they could have been past all those forts, because they'd flattened those forts and everything. Then they could have landed without any problem at all. They retreated, and then it was the high command. I mean, Churchill was, although he was First Lord of the Admiralty, he was a politician. He wasn't a military leader. The military decisions were made by the military after that. His idea was quite sound. And if you it's a bit before Drake's naval period, but if you look at as I said, Dr. Alex Clark's thing. The information he has on, well, history in general, but naval history in particular is immense. And he and Drac are really good friends.
Hey,
They're
hey,
actually in
Paul.
Canada next month for 2 weeks, going to Hamilton and Ontario, and going to see a couple of ships. But, yeah, so I mean, it's
I mean,
if more people used history to learn by the mistakes in the past.
Well, when Tino said he didn't like Churchill, he kind of hurt my feelings a little bit.
I don't like
You see the writing on my arm, Paul? You can't read it, but you see the writing on my arm?
Yeah.
I have nothing to offer but blood, tears, toil, and sweat right on my arm.
It's like they talk about the genocide of the Jews during World War II. Well, there was a genocide in World War I. That was the Armenians. And then what did the Japanese do to the Korean and the Chinese, especially with that?
In 1937 and 38, yeah.
Yeah, that nice their little genocide, their little concentration camp thing. What was it called?
713.
Yes.
No, that's not that. That was the test camp. But I mean, like,
yeah, that was poison thing.
I mean, the worst picture that I can remember seeing from World War II to me is it's from China, and it's a little baby, and he's sitting there with no clothes on, and there's bodies all around him, and he's just screaming.
Yeah, Nanking or something
that was the Nanking picture. Yeah.
But I will say
that I start getting choked up about it because it happened there too. And then Japanese, they did a lot to the Koreans also. Because Koreans and Japanese don't like each other.
But as we said earlier on,
I'm not just yet. Now, interesting, a few years before Gallipoli, Churchill did write an opinion that he absolutely did not want to do a landing there. He himself has said that a landing there in Gallipoli was a bad strategic. He written a whole opinion on how he didn't want to do this. And yes, it did happen under his watch, and yes, they were planning to sail through. And I think they would have lost 8 ships on the first day. I can't say that he's blameless because he did double down for a while on when these landings were not proving to work the way they should have, until then it became a political spiel for a while to try to make them work until he finally had to go.
Yeah, I mean, basically,
Churchill was a smart man. I mean, he was a smart man. He was an educated man. He's a well-traveled and read man. He was a far smarter man than most of the politicians we have today, which, granted, is not really very hard. And I think that is the thing we really need to look at today, as and to learn as opposed to then, is statecraft. We don't have great politicians, leaders, statesmen left. They're not traveled. They're not well-read. They all went to the same colleges and had the same professors, and they all learned the same load of horse shit. They haven't been in touch with the real world of real people. Most of them didn't serve in the military. Most of them don't even have families to care for. So the legacy that the politicians of today are carrying into their office is not near the same as what you had in the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s. And by that, and certainly Churchill was a giant. But yes, I disagree strongly with his decisions when it comes up closer to the war. But that becomes a matter of opinion, of personal. You can say a man is still clever and intelligent and smart, but I don't agree with his choices. But those are the choices he made for whatever reason he made them. It does. I will say that those choices are what cost the British Empire. And
the British, I don't think. I mean, to be perfectly frank, all the Second World War did was probably speed up the decline of the British Empire by 5 years. India would have gone around about the time it did go.
Yeah.
It was getting to the point where, I mean, if you look at the British Empire, it was Britain ended up, controlling a quarter of the world by accident. Basically, they went along and they would start off a trading post.
Yeah.
And be trading and everything, and then so like the French would come along and say they wanted a bit. It was like, oh no, you're not having that because you're our enemy. So then you had a bit of a fight about it, and then we took over territory.
Yes.
Or in India, you had the East India Company that basically took over India, and then when they became such a disgrace, they were dissolved by an order of Parliament, and then Britain got lumbered with it. And if we I mean, when you think that the Industrial Revolution started in the United Kingdom,
Yes.
and we were ahead of the world by miles in the beginning.
Yes.
And then it was like, why is everybody catching up? And it's like, well, because we're spending so much money supporting an empire that we can't afford.
Well, I don't think the United States was ready to become a superpower right at the end of World War II.
I
mean, because there was nobody left.
No, it wasn't that. You actually were in a situation in 1922 when they had the Washington Treaty for the limitation of naval power. America wanted parity with Britain on the number of battleships and cruisers and stuff like that because they saw Britain as a threat to America. And there's evidence that even up until 1936, there were plans that America were making in case Britain decided to have a go at America, which was not going to happen because Britain saw America as being an ally. But you have the situation that Japan probably wouldn't have attacked America if America hadn't have closed down on oil.
The oil, yeah.
Yeah.
And FDR did that, 2 years prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor? They started cutting down on the oil.
But they had to then set up. But you've got to think that from Japan to America is a very long way. From Japan to Hawaii is quite a long way. In order to do an effective attack, and one of the problems with Hawaii is that the admiral who was in charge of Hawaii at the time, who got absolutely slated over it.
He got screwed because they were not giving him what he needed in intelligence.
Yeah, he wasn't given any information that everybody was having.
I mean, thank God our aircraft carriers weren't there.
Well, what happened was Nimitz was offered the job and said, "No, I don't want that."
Halsey
and then
didn't want
Kimmel? Is it Kimmel?
Yeah.
Admiral Kimmel.
Yeah, Admiral Kimmel. He was offered the job, and it was like, "No, I'm not really interested. Who else is in the job?" Yeah. And then the name came up, and he goes, "Oh, fucking hell! There's no way I'm going to have him doing it." Yeah, okay, I'll do it. And he became his number 2. And he was the one who wasn't passing the information up to Kimmel that was coming up from the cipher.
Oh, it's like they had the radar station there on, I think it was Oahu.
Yeah,
they saw the Japanese planes coming in. Oh no, that's a flight of American planes coming in from Los Angeles.
No, that's what
the lieutenant said when they called into him, and he just said nothing. Didn't send it up. Didn't send anything. And
Well, it was
then
because they
boom,
were
it
just about to stand down. They were just about to stand down because it was only on partial use, wasn't it?
Yep.
So it was basically at the end of the shift, and they get a load of blips coming up, and it's like, oh, it's okay. They're only aircraft coming in from so and so.
And
Dismiss
Yes.
it.
Admiral Kimmel
We're
afterwards.
not going to let it run for another 10 minutes and see exactly what's going on and find out that actually it's not just 10 aircraft, it's 200 or whatever,
Yeah.
you know.
And Admiral
and-
Kimmel afterwards died pretty much. His career was shot all to hell, and it wasn't his fault.
Until, I mean, well, he basically got screwed all the way through
Mhm.
until 1944, when it finally went through and he was proven to be not culpable.
Right.
That he'd actually acted in America's best interest to the best of his ability, and one
And
of those was by getting the aircraft carriers out of
They
Hawaii
court-martialed him, didn't they?
twice.
Tino?
He shot himself, didn't he? Before he
Yeah.
was exonerated.
No,
So
Well, what
Really?
about what was it? The
I'm not
Pueblo
sure.
in Korea. That commander got raked over the coals too.
which one?
Pueblo, the American ship that North Korea has.
Oh, yeah. Well,
And
I
it's
mean,
still on the United States records.
you can't start a war just because somebody does a little something. If you're not ready for that war, I don't know if you noticed, but we only start wars when we're good, usually good and ready for them, or at least then they start. It usually doesn't happen on other people's premises.
Yeah,
Now,
we're
Bin
better at
Laden
planning.
started it with us.
Just like
Yeah,
we
but I mean-
will let you know when we kind of want to play. But I mean, when it comes to Pearl Harbor, yes, I mean, there's a reason the carriers weren't there. I mean, it was just, and a decade before, a report had clearly been written to the president on how if you took several steps, some 10 steps towards Japan with what you did, if that what it would take to enable them to or facilitate them wanting to go to war in a preemptive attack. And a lot of bad decisions were made that should and could have been avoided on all fronts when it comes to the 30s and 40s. And the interesting thing is, I believe the politicians were far smarter back then, and they saw their duties in more of a grander scheme than they do today. They had bigger visions than they do today, and they have. I think they saw their country, their role in their country bigger. It's something that actually means something. They're not just talking about third gender bathrooms and the shape of cucumbers. We're actually trying to do something that mattered on a bigger scale. And sometimes they would fail, or sometimes they would even see their role within the prism of honor or duty, which is again, things that are vastly forgotten today. And when we spoke of the British Empire, do you see the British, at least the Commonwealth, disintegrating within our lifetime now, given what Harry is doing and the whole developments? What do you think, Paul?
It's difficult to tell because, I mean, until we know exactly what Harry says this year, with it being the Queen's Diamond Jubilee or whatever it is,
Yeah.
then, I mean, the Queen's stepping back considerably from the amount of work she's doing, and
Yeah,
Charles
she
and
is.
Camilla are doing a lot more, and so is William and Kate. And I think that when the Queen dies, there are going to be some major changes within the royal family. You're going to find that Andrew is going to disappear very
Yes.
Andrew's
quickly.
already disappeared.
Yeah, but he's still trying to. He was quite prominent the last time the Queen was seen in public.
Yeah.
He was
Screwed
like,
himself.
sort of, because he's Mummy's favourite.
Mm.
But no, Charles will crucify Andrew, and he will not tolerate any crap from Meghan
Harry.
and Harry.
Well, thank God for that.
And William certainly won't.
I actually feel sorry for all of them because hell, they're freaking living under a microscope.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the biggest problem. Is that, I mean, the way I look at it is that it doesn't matter whether I support the royal family or not. I work for the Office for National Statistics, which means I collect information which is published for the public good, and we are supposed to be impartial.
Yes.
You can't go along to somebody who's totally left wing and be
well, think about it.
with them.
How many other royal families do you hear of other than England?
Well, you've got the Dutch royal family.
How many times do they make the news? You have the Japanese royal family. How many times do they make the news? The biggest thing they made the news is one of the daughters married a commoner and lost everything.
Yeah, so did one of the British royals, and look what that got him.
I feel sorry.
That's what happens when American actresses shows up.
Well, a few of the British royals have. I mean, Andrew married a commoner. So did Edward. So did William. So did Harry.
Yeah, but Harry needs to change his name to Harriet.
I was going to say, personally, I think that Harry's decision was.
Well, Prince Andrew's wife was too busy getting her toes kissed. God, I said it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you're in the situation with Meghan Markle knew what she was getting into. She was told beforehand, and still went ahead with it, and then spat the dummy out of the cop.
I mean, there's only one actor I care about.
A little pissy fit, and I think, prior to being married and everything, it was explained to her that once you join the firm, as they're called, there are certain rules that you abide by, and you break these rules, and basically you're out. And she's broken them, and so's Harry.
She's an American.
Doesn't matter whether she's an American, she's Chinese, she can be anything.
American women do not live by social rules.
No, she lives by her own rules.
She's basically a money grabbing bitch, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
That's why she married Harry. But I think that
wanted up her name.
I think that from the original question about the Commonwealth is the Commonwealth will stay together. You'll still have your Commonwealth Games, and you'll still have stuff like that. And Britain will do what it can to support Commonwealth countries where they can. The problem is that there's a lot of Chinese influence in African countries, which you're starting to have the communist effect again. It's a little bit like a Chinese Cold War rather than a Soviet Cold War.
Yeah, I agree with
that. Creates problems. But you've got the countries in the Caribbean I mean, the last royal tour that William and Kate were on, William did make an apology for the situation of slavery,
Well,
Ish.
but he also turned around and said, "But that is history, and you cannot put today's viewpoint on what happened in history. Otherwise, you're going to be criticizing everything that has ever happened throughout time, because your attitude is totally different to those at the time."
And you're correct.
well, it's like
But
Civil War. They're wanting, well, you owe us. Look what you did to us. You owe us money. And as far as I'm concerned, there's only one group of people in this country, in the United States, that are owed money, and that's Native Americans.
oh, they have their
absolutely.
casino. No, I'm kidding. We gave them casinos. Knock it off.
Low blow with the casino comment. Come on.
I'll actually no. I'll disagree with that a little bit, because I think there's. I mean, we have a complete skewed version and presentation of history, and in this country now we have argument about when the country was supposedly founded and all these nonsensical things. But you have to, again, we have to look at history through the eyes of those at the time, what we're not doing. And I will be the first one to say, if there's anyone in this country today that has survived slavery, we should absolutely give them reparations. The parents of the parents of the parents of, I'm sorry, we cannot keep punishing people, but that's what it deliberately is. It's the redistribution of wealth, and it's a whole political thing. It has nothing to do with what people actually care about. Because if it really truly was that anybody cared about those who have had slavery imposed on them, well, what about the 4 million women that are sold into sex slavery every year throughout this globe? Who is doing anything to save them? Who is trying to help
Irish?
them out? You see, or the Irish, but you're looking at slavery that's going on actually today. We have more slaves today than we did 150 years ago. And if we want to talk about sex slavery, and we want to talk about England, and we talk about some of the horrible things that has been going on there over the past couple of years, where the politicians are showing a complete lack of interest in talking about that case. If we talk about the millions of immigrants we have flooding our borders now, where a lot of them will end up into forced slavery or sweatshops or what have you, that no one cares about kicking down the doors of. We're talking about the cartels that are smuggling, or the Chinese that are smuggling, or the Russians that are smuggling Ukrainian women. There's women being sold into slavery all over the world, and nobody gives a damn about fighting for them. Nobody want to talk about it.
We have to fight for ourselves.
And
none
before
of the politicians give a damn.
We should help them. And that's just
I'm going to ask you a question. You're naturalized, aren't you?
I am as unnatural as I possibly can be. Yes, an American citizen. Yes.
I'm going to slap you. I swear to God. Because my mother was naturalized. She said that besides my brother and me being born, that was the proudest moment of her life, was when she raised her hand and took the oath.
Yes.
Okay. And I can still hold a German passport because my mother being German, as far as I know.
I'm technically first generation American in my family.
I'm first generation American in the Rosinski family because my brother was born in Germany.
Well, the problem you have with the German passport now is if you have not reapplied for it or held one, you might not be able to get one now.
Exactly.
I think the rules have changed.
Yeah, that was
if it was good enough for you to jump through all the hoops, and my mother to jump through all the hoops, and my great aunt and uncle that lost their son in World War II, they lived in California, to jump through the hoops, why the hell can't anybody else?
Yeah, right.
Well,
yes.
You want an honest answer to that? Because we have another hour to fill.
That's your department.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
I mean, why can't they do it? If I was born in
We
Germany,
don't want
yes,
to.
I would have done it
Yet, what's the motivation? Why would you bother when you can just walk over and say, "Hey, here I am. Where's my paycheck?"
because then I would be legal.
They don't care about that.
Well, maybe they don't, but I do.
Yeah, but
Yes, but we rule in a world where those who doesn't follow the law seems to be having all the benefits, while those who follow the rules have less and less say.
That
And that's
dumbass
not.
president of ours is going to sit there and let this border go. And I swear 9/11 is going to happen again. And it's going to happen somewhere else. It's not going to happen in New York, but it's going to happen somewhere else in the United States.
No, it'll be Chicago or California.
That's what I'm
I
thinking.
don't think we don't have to worry about being as America, just like Britain is being invaded every day and has high risks, and like Europe does. America doesn't have to worry about foreign wars coming here. We will self-destruct all by ourselves if we keep doing what we're doing. And I am gravely concerned because it's not taught. The common sense of insight is not really followed. There's no common sense thread. We're self-destructing, and this country will not stand if something doesn't happen. And my constant concern is that the whole concept of voting our way out of this back on a common sense governance of this country, I'm not sure that can actually happen. So that leaves two extremes, and none of them are very nice to think about. But one of them is going to have to happen.
Like abortion.
But
what about
either way
tampons
is extreme.
A kindergarten boys' bathroom? Oregon just voted that in to where that's the normal thing.
That
now.
ain't going to happen in Alabama, honey.
It's already happening in Oregon.
You have to remember the South is not like the North.
Yes, but you have to remember that. I mean, it seems from the way I look at things, in America, you have got two extremes. One's totally left, one's totally right.
Right.
There's very few people in the middle.
It's like abortion, okay?
Talking any common sense.
Well, we're labeled.
Like
I don't care who you are.
That's why we don't believe in labels.
Going to tell me what I can do with my body.
It's getting like that in this country. You've got the Conservative Party, you've got the Labour Party.
I am anti-abortion. I believe it's murder. So, if you want to go and get
that's a belief thing, isn't it?
Right. That's your
prerogative. But you also have
to do. I would never do it.
No, but you have to. You can't. My personal opinion is that it is up to the woman to make the decision.
Thank you.
Not for it to be.
It's not the government.
The facility should be there up until a certain point, unless it is for medical reasons. So, it's then the choice of the woman.
I mean, it's interesting because this is not a conversation we ever needed to have in Europe. This never came. There's been what I hate to say is a much more common sense approach to this than in this country, where everything has to be lined up in either or, which is not actually what the Supreme Court's opinion. Even if they come down on the other side, it doesn't take away the abortion rights. It just delivers it back out to the individual states. I think maybe some sort of a common sense legal framework would not be a bad thing to have. But again, we're back to now this is going to be the new distraction leading up to the midterms, which means we're not going to have a common sense conversation about this anyway.
Correctly.
I already know what I'm looking for, so.
Like I said, I mean, I this is never a conversation that we had in Europe because it just
It
I
never
think,
hit you in Europe.
I mean,
Well,
it was.
the only country in Europe it actually had any effect on was ERA. ERA
Yeah.
has always been, being a very Catholic country, has always been very anti-abortion, and so have their politicians. And I'm not exactly sure what their rules are at the moment, to be honest. Um,
Well, look,
but
if I was
but I
married to
mean,
one of you guys,
but at one time you were in a situation where Irish girls who wanted to get an abortion would just cross the border into Northern Ireland, or get on the boat and come over to Holyhead,
okay,
go to
look,
Sputty
if
Gwynedd, and
I
then
was married to either one of you guys, it is not my job to tell you, well, you need to go have a vasectomy because I don't want any more children. That's not my job.
Well,
That's your
my
job.
thoughts on
That's
that
not the
though,
government's job. Same way
Crystal,
as
exactly.
you can't tell me, well, you have to go get an abortion because you can't raise that child.
Well, that's
Well, you
yeah,
should have
Crystal.
given
I
the damn
agree with
pregnancy
that.
test.
That's the reason why it needs to be taken out of the federal government and put back into the states.
And I can tell you right now, Alabama, Georgia, most everybody in the state in the South will ban it. Remember, I live in the Bible Belt.
yeah, but I mean, you see, that's
So
one of
if a lady here wants to go and get an abortion, she's going to have to go up north.
that's the difference between the
That's
States
her
and
responsibility.
Europe. Europe
But
is separate. You have the
one of the
European
major
Union.
one of the major reasons why there was a civil war in the United States in 1860 was because of states' rights. The southern states got tired of Washington telling niggas what we could do, when we could do it, how we could do it.
That's why I don't understand why everybody's so mad about Roe versus Wade. Because what they're doing is if they get rid of Roe versus Wade, that means it goes right back to the states. The states have the say, not the
Yeah.
not the
It's
federal
like
government.
they said something last night on the news. Since Roe versus Wade, over 4 million African American children have been murdered.
65 million abortions since RW.
Thank you, Tina.
Yep.
But it's absolutely correct. If anybody bothered to read what this was all about, it's not banning abortions, not making anything legal or illegal. It is just pushing the decision back to the individual states.
Right.
But we're
And
never
that's
going
the
to
way
actually
it
ban
could be.
Yeah, but unless the mainstream media tells them what they're supposed to hear, that's how it works. That's the reason why I exist in the first place. That's the reason why my radio show exists.
Oh,
Yeah,
did you hear
Because
that
we
CNN
don't deal
Plus
with the mainstream.
died?
Who?
CNN Plus. Their
Oh
streaming
yeah. That's a
service
month.
died.
That's weeks
Yeah, that
ago.
was a month ago.
Where have you been?
Yeah, but you've got.
I don't go on the internet looking up World War II stuff.
in the
Oh, so what, somebody need to find me the music intro to Free Radio Europe. By the way,
Okay.
because I think I need to
Note.
use that for my broadcasts.
I want to ask you a question.
Yeah, that'd be
Whoa.
I can get you the
On
clip from Good Morning Vietnam.
what native Indian
Copywritten.
tribe? What
Well, you
native
can
Indian
always-
tribe's music do you use?
Say that again.
What Native American Indian tribe do you use their music to? On Lost Battlefields, because that is an Indian chant. I've heard too many of them.
No, it's not. It's a
Well,
Viking
I'd
music.
say if it is, it ain't from my
It's
tribe.
Viking?
It's a Viking theme.
Okay.
And I
Because
and I bought
it sounds very close to Native American.
Yeah, well,
I
they're
wouldn't know.
very, very,
I want to tell you on that.
very
Really.
similar historic cultures, if you think about it. If you go back
they're
long
not-
enough in history, very similar, except the Vikings were seafaring
Yeah, I mean, and the
because
music.
of their location.
That
Yeah.
show that was on History Channel, Vikings, was there any truth to that, Tino?
Well, they had longships and
Well, I know
swords.
that, but they didn't. Du bist ein
Well,
großes Arschloch.
I mean, some of it was not off, and some of the events were based on known events that happened.
But
It's still
women
a TV.
were
It's still a
able
TV.
to.
Yes, women would go Viking, which, by the way, is the correct word way of using the word Viking. Viking is not something you were; it was something you did. You would go Viking in the spring
Okay,
and
'cause
raid and pillage and trade, and women were on the Viking ships, and bones of a few women with battle scars have been found. And you can also go to the ship in it was in Norway up in Oslo that had a female Viking queen. Women had a very high place in Viking society, all the way to the point that if a woman was raped, she could choose. What
yes,
the hell?
you just heard
She could
Metallica.
choose. Knock it off. She could choose to take her own revenge on the perpetrator.
Well, it's
So-
like Native American tribes. A few of them are matriarchal. Cherokee are, Choctaw are. And I mean, it was just amazing reading that and finding out what all the women were able to do. Men couldn't
Yes.
divorce, but the woman could. She could take all his stuff, throw it out the teepee, and out he went.
Which women could also do in England, all the way up to the Victorian age, if the man couldn't perform, which he had to document in a room full of men watching him not being able to perform, which
Stage fright.
facilitate that very thing.
Really?
Yes.
I wouldn't worry about it. I'd go find a boyfriend.
I say, give me
Way
a
up past the
give me a
Middle
few
Ages.
shots of whiskey. I don't care.
It was a way up past the Middle Ages. A woman could, if the man couldn't perform his duties, then she could cite that as a reason for divorce. And for him to prove that he could, well, he had to prove it in front of the committee.
That's what I'm saying. You give me a couple shots, I'll show you my old face.
It was in front of the church, wasn't it?
Or I would become a freaking nun. No,
Well, a lot of women in Britain did in the Middle Ages and everything. If their husband died or was killed in battle and everything, quite a lot of them would go to monasteries or to nunneries and become nuns, even though they may have children and everything
in
like
the Tale of King Arthur, that's what Guinevere did.
Yeah, that's a tale. It's a story. There's the historic accuracy for King Arthur is very muddled by a certain.
I was always fascinated with Merlin. I was always fascinated with Merlin. The movie Excalibur fixed me.
Merlin Everett,
Monty Python.
Well, I mean, we don't even know if, my lord, what's the Boudica? We don't even know if she actually existed. There's so many British fables we don't actually know.
Boudica, they reckon, is probably an amalgamation of 3 or 4 different tribes which were in the fens around about that time, who were led by queens.
Elizabeth I
over probably a 200-year period. So their stories have all amalgamated together, and to some extent, that's the situation with the Arthurian legend of the Knights of the Round Table and everything. And what you see in movies is it's too far into the future, Arthurian legend is based basically around just after the Romans have left.
Tino,
So,
Yes.
remember me asking you about that ME-323 Gigant,
Yes.
that transport plane? One crash landed on an island called Medellina. It is a little bit north of Sicily in the Med. Another one crashed on land, one crashed in the water.
Yeah.
They found the remains of the one in the water.
Yes.
I saw that. I was watching it yesterday on a World Timeline or something like that. But I thought that was neat that they found that one because that's the only one found. Every one of the others were destroyed.
I thought that. I mean, the 323. There was a few of them built.
Yeah,
I think
they
there
had
was-
2 of them made.
No,
They
quite a
built-
few.
No, there was several. Yeah, there was.
there's more than 2.
Yeah, by
No,
estimates,
I
what
said
about
200.
Oh, right, 200. Yeah, possibly.
And this is the one that they found in the water, and it's like it just sank in the water when it crash landed.
198. Yeah.
And I think they're sending that you can go diving there. And I know you dive.
Yeah, I dive, of course. Yeah, I would love to. There's a lot of. Do we know exactly where it was? It was in the Mediterranean somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's right off the Medellina Island, and that island is just north of Sicily.
that's?
I mean, you could take a ferry over to it from Sicily.
Yeah. That's where they were looking for Rommel's hidden gold that he had nothing to do with because he wasn't there. No, that was the SS
Right.
gold. Yeah.
No, that was the SS gold.
Now they're trying to
SS
tear up
gold.
the Philippines looking for Japanese gold.
Now, what I really would like to dive is the German World War II, the giant seaplane. It's huge. It looks like a ship. I think or something. There's none of them survived the war, but they were very, very interesting.
I always wanted to go to that lagoon over in it's one of those Japanese islands, and they got all kinds of ships with tanks in them and everything else that sank. Americans sank them.
There's a lot of ships sitting fully loaded here and there and around the world that will be interesting to dive on.
There'll be some interesting ones around Muratora Atoll. Would be some interesting wrecks to dive there, but I think the radioactivity
I can take you to
$1 million point.
I can take you to a Confederate Civil War ship that they pulled out of the Chattahoochee River. It's the CSS Chattahoochee. It's in a museum.
Oh, they already pulled it out? Then there's nothing for me to do.
No, if you want to go diving in the Chattahoochee River with all them gators, go for it.
Oh,
I need a new pair of boots.
I was going to say, they turn into nice belts. Thank you.
I need a new purse.
That's how I got my last cigar case. We had a disagreement and I won. That's actually a true story. But I want to go see at some point in time when I can. I'm going to the Philippines to see my buddy from Game of Thrones, and we're going to go dive on some of the interesting things out there.
And you got to get me a picture of my great cousin.
I have a grave in the Philippines. I need to go take a picture at that is on my to-do list.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, like so a couple of months ago, I transferred to the Mounted Cavalry. I'm actually in the 26th Mounted, which was the unit that did the last cavalry charge ever on the Philippines, Filipino Scouts. So I hope that being a Filipino Scout,
Tino is going to go find my great cousin, who was born German, that joined the United States Army and died in the Philippines in a plane. I even gave him the coordinates for it. As far as I know, no one in the family has a picture of the grave.
I know that's. Was it you that I'm looking for the grave for? I just have a to-do list. I thought it was somebody else. Maybe I'm looking for
Lieutenant Hans Gaspar.
I wrote Conan to go take a picture of it, but they're still sort of locked down and all sorts of nonsense. So
Oh, yeah.
Sooner or later, he bought himself the Willys Jeep knockoff out there.
Oh,
It's called the Jeepette or whatever it's called. It sort of looks like a Willys Jeep, just with sharper edges, and you can build it in your garage. It was very interesting. They do the same thing for 1911. There's also a sort of Filipino knockoff made in the garage version.
I still got to go out to Harmony Church and find out about that Calvary and Armor Museum. If you can go in there.
Holy shit, somebody's visiting Paul.
You know what?
That's
Was
my
that your
alarm to
grandmother
take some medication.
clock?
No, alarm to take some medication.
Oh, my
Oh.
God, my grandfather clock goes off, and you think the world's coming to an end.
I think we should all take some medication. I'm all in favor of this. We live in a different time. We need to be medicated.
Want some blood pressure? But no, I got to go find out if you do come down here, if they will open up so you can go in.
Give me please. Give me the fucking keys. Just give me the
Because
keys.
I want to see, because I want to go in there with my camera and a couple of, because they got that World War I tank. They have German tanks. They have Russian tanks. And I want to go see them. Especially that World War I one. And they're redoing one of the Italian ones.
Oh, I've always wanted to see an Italian tank destroyer. Not that little 2000 knockoff thingy. I want to see the 90 mil Italian tank destroyer. I always wanted to see one of those.
I think they have it. I'm not for sure. I'd have to find out.
There's a couple of French ones. I don't think. Well, maybe they could have captured one in the desert.
But I figured that if you go to Andersonville, okay, that's a day at Andersonville right there. National Infantry Museum, that's a day there.
Joliet Prison.
Then you got to go to the World War II. They have a live diorama. It's the original buildings. They have moved them from Harmony Church down behind the National Infantry Museum of Patton's company.
I actually like dioramas. I like dioramas more than I like digital walkthrough.
Well, this is a whole, you can walk through it. It's a whole
Except when
street.
Paul makes them.
It's got the chapel there. It's got Patton's headquarters. It's got barracks. Then
Outstanding.
the Confederate Naval Museum is here in Columbus. They've got signs where the last battle of the Civil War were.
Yes, because I've been to the battlefield in Murfreesboro on Stony Creek where the first battle was.
Oh, and one day I could take you to Warm Springs, Georgia.
That sounds familiar. Have I been there?
And
No, I
go see
haven't
the
been there.
little White House where FDR died.
Was that where he was? I thought he was in his. That was just a summer house.
Oh, he was in Warm Springs, Georgia.
Oh yes, it was. Yes,
You can actually go into the Polio Institute there, and that water is warm. It is.
You know what?
Just wild.
I misheard there. I thought you said Polo Institute, and I was thinking, what's that got to do with him?
Nope, polio.
Yeah, I realised.
You go to Kennesaw Mountain, Redstone Arsenal would take a day.
Well, we got abandoned air bases and stuff and around here, but I'm still trying to get the man to come out here to do a video with me on a bomb factory.
I am thinking about. I'm working on DAG. You'll get a kick out of that on the duck factory. I am thinking this autumn is going to be a U.S. trip, depending how much I get done this year. I'm like as everything else, it boils down to money. And speaking of money, now that we've been doing this for like 5 hours, you need to actually go back to work and have breakfast.
You actually work?
I am currently working, as you can clearly see from my backdrop.
You should have had what I had for lunch.
I haven't had breakfast yet. Had half a
Well,
cucumber driving to work.
I would eat chicken quesadilla for breakfast.
Yeah, me too. Actually,
Not any bugs either.
Yeah, bugs are just
I'm-
extra spring.
I'm picturing pralines and spam.
Yeah.
Pralines, you butt.
However,
I love
however,
pralines.
if I don't get to finish what I'm doing, then you guys won't have anything to look at next week or the week after. And
No,
like I
I'll
said,
just go back through and
it's gonna be a hectic it's gonna be a hectic couple of weeks, and I would be curious if I even have any reception where we have drill, because we are bringing the horses and everything out in the middle of the desert. So our next week I may be AWOL from connection for a few days. So
I can always go back
you can
and
play with the horse,
rewatch
but I don't
Last
want
Nazi
to-
So Good again.
But to everyone who has stayed with, like I said, the trip's going to be a quick in and out of Czechoslovakia, mostly Austria, Germany, France, Belgium, Holland, and a bit up through Poland. And I'm going to, if anybody come up with any interesting German forts in the Alps or Alpine forts, that would be interesting. I would like to see a few of those. And again, there's that bunker out in France I need to know. So and then, of course, what is in Germany, anywhere in Thüringen. I'm going to be spending some time in Thüringen. See if there's anything.
I want you to go up there off the dam to that torpedo place, the one that's in the water.
Yeah, in Poland.
Yeah,
but
I want to see that.
It's probably it's out near Hell. That's also where Rolf Engel had his research institute. I need to find out a little bit more about where. I have some coordinates, I have some possibilities, but it's in the opposite end of where I'm going in the other three directions. I'm trying to spend a little more time with it. Maybe it depends. I also wanted to go to the British Isles and look at the big installations there, and Normandy. But again, if I only have a month, I'm not sure I can make everything. So I'm going to have to sort of be productive. But we will see.
And I would go to England. Those batteries they have off the coastline, where they had people that had guns, where they could stop the Germans or fire the Germans if they came across the channel.
Yes, those nice bunkers with openings facing the enemy.
These are not bunkers.
You mean
just ones that sit in the water?
Shimmering Sands forts on the Thames estuary.
Thank you, Paul.
You're talking about the flak tower sitting out in that looks like War of the Worlds tripod things where
I would
covered
love
in
to see them. To me, those are interesting, and that they've been there 80-something years.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to go anywhere.
They've been there longer than that. They were built there for the Napoleonic Wars.
Cool.
Which, the flak towers? No, the other castles.
The bases of some of them were actually built up from what were originally from Napoleonic.
And was that one island out there, one of the Jersey Islands?
Well, you've got Guernsey and Jersey, which have German fortifications on.
Yeah.
But also you have British fortifications against the French on Jersey and Guernsey, which have been built up over the years, which date back to before the Norman conquest.
Didn't Queen Victoria build a big, huge castle on one of those islands?
No, she had a house on the Isle of Wight called.
That's where they had that crazy motorcycle race.
Yeah.
No, that's the Isle of Man.
That's Isle of Man.
Just north of
I don't know if we actually do any of us know anybody on Guernsey and Jersey because I don't actually think I know anybody there. So no one has written me from there yet, but I'm sure someone will be found because I'll be damned if I'm going to take a boat all the way over there and then I have nobody to let me in or show me around. Wasting time looking for coordinates. But anyway, I will be in Hamburg. Dynamite. Yes, I will. Hochburg on Hamburg. Yeah, but I can't get into the Hochburg in Hamburg. I tried. Unless you know a way in which case send me an email. I'm just replying to.
Send him a detailed map.
Shoot me an email because last time I was in Hamburg, they were rebuilding one and the other one was closed. The third one had turned into something weird. But I want to, and I really would like to do some more stuff in Hamburg. And I may actually have a friend with me that I need to stick on a plane there. So I will probably be going through there. And I'm then coming down to Berlin and see the guys with the dogs and going to find some other stuff. Anyway, let's wrap it for now. I'll see if I can do one more of these before I go. Otherwise, while I'm in Europe, I'll be doing some lives out in Europe probably and see what I can do when I get there. And we're going to try to see if I can find something interesting. I know there's some what's called, like someone just wrote the doc. There's more explosive factories out there, and they're mostly all above ground. So that might actually be a place where I can do a live walkthrough. But I won't know until I get there. Anyway, that was fun. See if anybody learned anything from us. Probably not.
I did about England.
It's still there. Of course you did, Brat.
But I got to go refill on Dr. Pepper. I'm empty.
I shall talk to you all soon. Paul, get some rest. Machine, I'll see you later.
Y'all be good. Have a great rest of the week and weekend.
Everybody in chat.
Doodle.
Nice to see y'all.
Bye, chat.